Diarmuid Gough, I can see people are logging in from all over Ireland and indeed possibly even all over the world. We're géad fáilte isteach wherever you are in Ireland, or indeed wherever you are in the world. Chuig Fórum Forbartha Náisiúnta an Chumann Komogi. This is the third year the National Development Forum has been run by the Komogi Association, but of course this year, as we all know at this stage, nobody needs to hear about unprecedented times anymore. We are all online. And I think in the past year, perhaps we've learned a lot about the power of sport and the power of the volunteer in all sports. But I think especially in Gaelic games, it's something we've learned this year in particular. It doesn't matter what code you're involved in. Without a volunteer, we've always known this, we don't have sport. But in 2020 and possibly rolling into a lot of 2021 as well, without people like you who are currently tuned in all over the country and indeed different parts of the world in Europe and anywhere else, without you, we certainly wouldn't have games. So I think it's really pertinent to start off this forum this morning with a group discussion with people you all know, and they don't need an introduction, but let's give an introduction anyway. My name is Máire Treasa. All my job is to try and get some knowledge out of these wonderful people. We have Ursula Jacob. She's of course an All-Ireland winner with Wexford. David Gough, an All-Ireland referee. Wexford is taking over today. We have Diarmuid Lyng. He's a former Wexford hurler and also an advocate for the good life. Agus, last but certainly by no means least, Tracey Kennedy, former Cork County Board chairperson, who's currently holding parents together as she's trying to ensure that children are getting some kind of education at home as well, and trying to keep families from being completely broken apart by the stress of it all. Gurmila Mahagui for joining us. I think, Tracey, we might start with you because I suppose of all the panelists, you probably have the best experience of all of knowing that, yes, we need volunteers, but volunteers also need to be organised in a way to make sure that we get the best out of them, to get the best out of the sport.
Yeah, and morning everyone, and I suppose just a big thank you to all those volunteers out there, because without you we would have no sporting organisations. That's the reality of it. You know, everyone involved in our associations is a volunteer, and it is an absolutely fantastic contribution to our communities. You're right, Máire Treasa, I suppose support for volunteers is a huge thing, because yeah, we can have all the volunteers in the world, and you know, we're great people for volunteering, but there is a level of organisation required as well. I would always say that obviously the most important people involved in our games are the players. It's absolutely critical. And then it's our responsibility as administrators to ensure that all the conditions are absolutely right for our players to go out and play their games, whether that's at club or county level, or you know, right down all the way down to our youngest members. That's our role as administrators, is to make sure that those conditions are correct. But yeah, volunteers need support then in the organisation of those clubs and communities, and particularly, I suppose, for many years we had, you know, very traditional type setups in our associations where you had the same people involved for years and so on, and that doesn't serve us anymore. We need to have all our communities involved in our associations. So we have a lot of people getting involved now who maybe don't have a long tradition of involvement in Gaelic games, and it is really there's really an onus on us to provide the supports that they need, and it's fantastic to see Komogi providing this type of conference to support our volunteers.
Ursula, I think obviously you understand the power of Komogi. You've come through it, you've experienced the best of it, and you're still getting benefits out of it, you know, after you've put down the hurl at the county and all that kind of stuff. We all know though, sometimes when people take a break, especially girls, it can be quite difficult to get them to pick up the hurl again and go out and play Komogi. We've lost a year now nearly. I know there's been some training going on, but obviously nothing like we would have had before. And I suppose, I know a lot of people, because these questions did come in, people are worried, you know, have we lost some Komogi and how do we recover it?
Yeah, without a doubt, it's going to be a challenging time once we do collectively go back together. But my thing about it would be to constantly keep moving forward and looking forward, whether it's in sport or whatever. I don't think there's massive benefit in looking back and seeing what we've missed out on. You know, I think it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a new challenge for us all when we do collectively go back collectively to training. And I know in some circumstances, in myself here at the moment, you know, we're still involved at the club championship stage, and we're doing things, you know, collectively, you know, by staying apart. We're doing Zoom classes, we're doing our best, and it's a challenge for everyone, and it's how everyone adapts to that. And I think one positive taken out of this whole COVID situation is, you know, the new skills that we've learned to deal with, you know, new challenges that we face. We've had to adapt that, and we've had to be flexible in what we do. And I think maybe go easy on ourselves as well. When we go back to the collective environment, the first thing that we really need to do is, you know, enjoy it. You know, recognize that what we've missed out on, yeah, that has been a challenge for us all, but that when we do go back to the group environment and in person and face to face, I think we're going to appreciate it that much more, because, you know, we've missed out on maybe the last year or so, but I would always say keep pushing forward, keep looking to the positives, because, you know, it's like a defeat in a game. There's no point in looking back. You can learn from things, and there has been positives taken out of the last year. And I think we all have developed, you know, greater skills in the last year too. So I think that's a positive.
Diarmuid, I know you've been very active in helping coaching people from lots of different age groups, but I know especially with children over the last few years. In fact, the first time I met you, you were coaching children in Komogi and Connemara. The hurling's coming closer and closer to my parish all the time. But has your approach to, I suppose, coaching and keeping people involved, be they young or old, male or female, has it changed on yourself now that you've become a dad and you can kind of see, you know, maybe the pressures parents might feel as well, even if they are, whether or not they are volunteers?
It's certainly changed, Máire Treasa. I think that, like, it's interesting looking at it from the standpoint of an organisation and an organisational shift to create the safety and the structure around how we keep volunteers involved and how we apply ourselves once we are involved. And I suppose one of the things that I'm feeling much more lately is that there are natural methods that we can just take part in. It doesn't need to be as hands-on. We don't need as many structures, I feel, in some ways. And when I go to a training session now, my interest isn't creating loads of structures around it and cones and the venue being in a GA field and things like that. I suppose I'm interested in maybe bigger influences that keep us programmed in and keep us tuned into our place and our area. And I think that those are sources of energy that maybe otherwise you wouldn't get. As a parent, like, I mean, certainly things change in that you feel an awful lot more empathy towards young people. Maybe that shouldn't be the case, but as a kind of a self-driven athlete, when I was playing myself, that's one of the things you lose. And one of the things you lose probably at the greatest cost is empathy for yourself and to begin to know even your own boundaries, because you're so driven towards something. So I think that just on what Ursula's saying as well, it feeds into it. I think like there's time lost in one respect, but actually this is like a reimagining of tomorrow. A reimagining of today. Like what's lost, the conditions have just changed and they're constantly changing. It's not like we're going to go back to a normal. It's like the conditions are just constantly changing, and okay, we expect them to be a certain way tomorrow, but this is shown, if anything, that it's totally and utterly unwritten, and we're just moving with life. We're not going from one set of conditions to another. We're just moving with life, and how quickly can we move with it? So it's changed in that I think that people's energy in it is very, very different to what it was, because there's much more naturalness and there's much more gratitude towards the chance to play, as opposed to all of the structures and the seriousness of having to win. And I think that's a huge opportunity for the Komogi Association, that shift, because they're at a point of imagining the future an awful lot more.
If there's one person amongst these panelists who doesn't lack energy and moving things on, it's David Gough. He knew I was going to go straight to him. I thought the big grin there. David, you've experienced obviously from the elite side, obviously with your training with the refereeing. I know you've played club. You're also a Moontor, and you understand, I suppose, how, or you do your best to keep children motivated. And I know there's a lot of parents at home and they're thinking, how do I keep them playing Komogi? Or how do I keep them, what can I do? Like, I don't know one end of a hurl from the other. How do I keep my kids, at the very least, interested to ensure that they'll be happy to go back? Because we all know sometimes if you take a long break from something, especially as children, they might go off to do something else, or they might just lose all interest, or they might lose confidence. So what advice would you give parents?
It's a really difficult sphere for parents at the moment, because they have been almost landed with the full-time care of the children throughout the last 18 months, and some of them just haven't been equipped to properly prepare children, educate them properly from home, homeschooling, and to offer a variety of different activities that can meet the needs of the children at different stages during the day. And we know that children have so many different needs, and when we see them in a classroom, we see them kind of as, I'd say, an acorn, you know, and the teacher is there to provide the right environment for that acorn to grow and to flourish and to become eventually its oak tree. And that's a difficult concept sometimes for parents to gather, because when they get the work at home, you know, they see the need to get the work finished rather than creating the environment where the child can learn. Sometimes the parents are worried about the end product and getting the school book finished or the work page finished or whatever it is finished. And it's a difficult concept for some parents. And when you tie that back to Komogi, then they're not all Komogi coaches either, or have the skills to teach the children Komogi and keep them interested. But what I would say is maybe to do up a simple chart, maybe a visual sort of timetable, and give the children some challenges to do during the week. Maybe that they have to go out and practice a certain skill and it needs to be completed in so many different ways, and then gauge that process for them visually so the child can see their own growth in their learning, that when they go out, you know, 1 week later to practice the skill they practiced last Monday, that they can see they can do it a little bit better, a little bit more confidently, and a little bit more competently. And that's charted for them. Stick it up on the fridge, you know, give them a little reward if they do 10 more, you know, seconds of balancing the schlitzer on the hurl or whatever skill it is, and just give the child a little bit of a boost. But children are very visual learners, and that type of simple thing of just charting a little bit of progress will keep them involved, keep them active, and keep them motivated.
I can see Ursula just nodding along there. I could see some things going into the training WhatsApp group now for, like David Gough said, do this. But, you know, you're still involved in Komogi because obviously, well, one, you were good at it, but also they were volunteers who kept you going from day one, Ursula. You wouldn't be the hurler you are if it wasn't for the fact that somebody got you out at under 6s, under 8s, under 10s, up through your teen years.
Yeah, and I suppose the gas thing about it, you know, is I started playing Komogi when I was maybe 7 or 8 years of age, and some of the same people that were involved back then, almost 30 years later, are still involved. So it just shows the sheer commitment, maybe lunacy at times, that they're still involved, but it just shows how much, you know, sport and Komogi in particular can mean to a community. And in my own parish, you know, sport has been such a massive part of everyone's lives. You know, anytime I'd say I'm from Owler to Balloch, you know, straight away they'll mention hurling or Komogi in some form, and that's a nice thing, because no matter where you go, whether it's in Ireland or farther abroad, it's that, you know, common topic that we have that we can talk about. But, you know, looking back on some of the volunteers, and even more so this year, you know, when we went back collectively club training, you know, the COVID officers that were there in place, you know, I fully recognise the role that they play behind the scenes. You know, we're out on the pitch and maybe we get all the plaudits and we get all the praise, you know, and the headlines in the papers. But unless you have a strong committee of volunteers, right from the chairperson down, who'll do the stuff like the fundraising behind the scenes, whether you've got people volunteering to referee matches or do linesman or whatever, without those people, sport wouldn't exist, Komogi wouldn't exist. And I would owe so much to those people. And I can name them in my own club, 5 or 6 personnel who are doing it for the love of the parish, for the love of young people, wanting to help them develop as Komogi players. And it's something, you know, I think we should never underestimate the power of the volunteers within a club setting, because they have given us so much, and it's nice to recognise their importance in the game too.
It can be hard to be a volunteer, doesn't matter where you are in Ireland, Tracy, but at the very least, you know, perhaps in Ireland you've got somebody you can always ask a question to. But I know, I'm conscious we have people from all over the world tuning into this, like for example, like Canada or the US, and they're trying to develop what is essentially a new sport in a new area, not even a parish, you know, it's a patch, an area where there might be a few Irish people or even people just interested in playing sport. And they're trying to figure out what's the best way to harness that kind of energy, Tracy. Do you have any advice for them to help get things off the ground and to keep them up off the ground?
And it's so difficult. I can't even imagine what that challenge must be like for anyone involved in any kind of a new club. You know, when you think, look, you know, all of us here are from very established clubs where there's a support network going back years and years and generations, if you like. But I know my brother-in-law, my sister and brother-in-law are based in Dubai, and they were in Qatar before that. And my brother-in-law would have been involved in GAA clubs in both Qatar and in setting up a new club in Dubai, the Jumeirah Gales. And I suppose it's a question of just, you start with that small nucleus of people, those 3 or 4 people who are willing to put their energy into the development of the new club. Also, I think reaching out to the support provided by our national associations is really important, because that support is there, you know, there's support available to you there. Starting with that little nucleus is just so important. And then seeing, you know, I suppose every little thing you do, publicising it, social media has allowed us a wonderful opportunity to publicise things completely free of charge, you know, whether that's here at home or abroad, spreading your message. You know, once you get that small, you only need a very small group to start spreading that word. Once the positivity starts to spread, you will get more people involved. And the thing is, you know, there's a huge network of the Irish diaspora out there who are only dying to get involved in our games. I think you need to start with that. It's great to see so many of our international units now bringing in people as well from outside the Irish community, non-Irish players of our games and so on. That's brilliant as well. But I think you have to start with the nucleus of that small group of Irish people, and then your message will spread. Targeting the right people, it's the same advice for, you know, some of our overseas units are far ahead in terms of even things like gender balance units at home. So there is that great enthusiasm out there, and you know, it definitely should be something that you'd be able to tap into.
Following on from what Tracy and Ursula have just said there, Diarmuid, and those few volunteers, every club has them, every committee has them, the people who've given so many years, so much time. I can only imagine sometimes the trauma they've gone through trying to keep the show on the road. And that nucleus, I'd imagine every once in a while, is there a risk that we might put too much weight on that nucleus, nearly if they're too good?
Which, look, there's no doubt that we do, and the question is probably what do we do about that, because it inevitably happens, and it inevitably happens in any walk of life, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you do need people at the centre to carry something, to carry an idea, to carry a dream, to carry a vision, and it all works out from there. To sustain them and to keep them sustained, you need fresh energy coming in all of the time. We had the Wellbeing Conference last week, and this came up with Colm Kills in Dublin, and they were talking about the impact of the social game on their club. And the social game, when you break it down to the mechanics of the game itself, people have questions about, you know, competitiveness and the idea of a friendly game and everything else. But what Colm Kills were reporting outside of that was far more interesting, far more powerful, and has far more opportunities in it. And one of the things that they were saying was that involvement in the club at an organizational level has increased tenfold from the arrival of social games. Now, one of the things that happens along with that is we don't have, and I think this is what you're talking about, Máire, with the nucleus. If you've got the 5 or 6, I think what happens to us sometimes, and Tracy referenced it as well, with the notion of established mechanisms. When we come to a club, you already have the established mechanisms of the club moving, and you just kind of fit in and be part of that. You see where your skill is, you see where your strength is, and you sit into it. But often we become limited by our roles in a GAA club as well, like we're just a player, or we're just the chairman, or we're just a selector. And what they found was, with the arrival of the social game into the club, people came in as players again, and all of a sudden they were playing with the chairman or with the selector or with the kids or whatever it was, and those roles broke down. And once those roles broke down, they felt a freeing of energy to contribute to the club in a different way. Now they are profound possibilities, I think, in particular for the 5 or 6 who are at the centre often, but also for the club in general, because they're going to bring in more based on a very simple fact, I think, and we ignore it so often in the GAA. Anybody who walks in the door, drives in the gate of a GAA club anywhere in the world, you can tell yourself, based on your role in society, that you're there as a parent, that you're there as a taxi driver, that you're there as a chairman or a treasurer or whatever you are. But at the end of the day, you have arrived into the gates of a place of play. And in your mind, that should be what you're doing. You're arriving to a place of play, which means you can play. whether you're 40, 50, 60, it doesn't matter. You can play in that place. And once we return and restore the essence of play into our games, which the social games can do, and which the Komogi Association are looking at and are charting a bright future with it, I think it's like it's medicine down the track. Everything else can kind of heal from that point. So it addresses the different, it addresses those different ills along the way, and I think it's the area I would be most excited about for the organisation and for the game, for the men's and women's game.
It's I was just thinking as you spoke there, Diarmuid, it'd be a very brave selector who decide, actually, you know what, I'm going to tog today and make sure he or she doesn't get a hurl across the shins. But
it's happened plenty of times, Máire Treasa.
Oh, I can only imagine. This is what David, actually picking up on what Diarmuid said there, a place of play, yes, but also, and I know you're so strong on this as well, this is where sport can be a place of inclusion, to encourage diversity, to encourage people, doesn't matter who you are, what colour you are, who you like, who you don't like. It's a place where everybody can get together and just be social. And there's a power in that because you enjoy it, and it means you'll keep coming back and you might contribute as well as a volunteer.
And that's 100% right. And I loved what Diarmuid said there as the club being a place of play. And I'll bring it back down to children and children's level. And what I would say about sport is, by its very definition, sport is any activity that involves fun. And if you're talking about diversity, inclusion, and everybody playing together, I've only seen it here recently outside on the green opposite the house and in level 3. Children going back onto the green here and playing football. And when I look out the window, you see maybe 8 or 9 children. They get the ball, they put down their jumpers as goalposts, the same way we did when we were children, and they just want to play, to have fun, and irrespective of height, of gender, of racial ethnicity, of diversity, inclusion, you name it, it doesn't matter to them. They just want to play, and they play. And I've stood and watched them, and after a few minutes, it could be 5 versus 4, it could be 6 or 7-0, and the children, by their very own good-natured self, will decide, you know, this isn't actually fun anymore. This isn't fair. We'll swap around the teams and make it a little bit more even. And we need to remember that sometimes, and volunteers should remember that. It is adult imposed models on kids that forces them into organized training sessions, into leagues, into competitions, into, we have to win these matches. We need to top the table. And there's nothing worse than for a child who is excluded by being left on the sideline and not allowed to play. So children, by their very nature, they are inclusive, they are cognizant of diversity, but it's irrelevant to them. They learn bad behaviors as they grow up, and that causes issues for diversity and inclusion. But by their very nature, they are fair and equal people. And for the volunteers out there listening in today, I would say those attitudes can also be unlearned as well. And that is a huge thing for the volunteers to be able to do going forward.
I'd say, Ursula, as well, that's not just for children. It doesn't matter what age you are. If you're showing up to training or wanting to show up to training, you want to feel welcome, and you want to feel that every once in a while you might get a game, even if you probably aren't that great. And that's where maybe what Diarmuid and David were feeding in on, playing socially. There's a role for that, and possibly we didn't appreciate that up until very recently.
And I think that's what I'm saying. You know, we need to incorporate the fun element. You need to feel that everyone on the panel, you know, has a part to play. Whether, there is the people that are automatic starters every day in a game, but you know, for anyone that's maybe a sober, feeling disheartened that they never get a game, I think going forward, I think we're going to see the element of, you know, giving everyone a chance. You know, we've seen in the last year how difficult it has been, and sport is the release for people when this all hopefully ends soon and we're back to maybe the new normal. You know, giving people the opportunity to play, to express themselves, because sport is a great way of expressing yourself in a different way. You know, you could have a really bad day in a really poor mood, but anytime I've ever went running myself, done even a few minutes of exercise, and the benefits are just brilliant. And being collectively around people who are of a similar mindset can only improve your mood. And I think definitely if you don't have fun, and if you're not feeling that part of, you know, that sense of enjoyment, then you're not going to get that same graw or love for the game. So, you know, the number one thing for me going forward is that everyone is having that element of fun. You know, obviously there's the competitive side of things, but without fun, you know, sport is not going to be enjoyable anyway.
Tracy, you've broken so many glass ceilings with the job you've done down in Cork, and I know even when you left the job, you said, you know what, there's still a few more glass ceilings out there that need to be broken. You know, we're getting there, but we're only chipping away at it. What advice would you give? Because I'm well aware there's probably volunteers here today who do great work for their clubs. I might just be a bit shy to go, what about county or maybe provincial, or why not go for Ard Chorla? There's something holding, I think, a lot of people back. I don't know, and it's not a gender thing. I think it's male and female. What advice would you give people for that?
Yeah, and I think it can be very daunting. You know, you enjoy doing something in your club, and certainly for years I enjoyed being my club secretary, and you know, I had no thoughts of going beyond that or doing anything outside the club, because I think for all of us, our club is at the heart of everything we do. You know, everything else is in addition to that. But I would certainly say that there are women involved in GA clubs in Cork who would make far better county chairpersons than I did. They would buy and sell me. Absolutely amazing women out there involved in Komogi and GA, you know, and making phenomenal contributions. And I often ask myself, you know, what is it that stops these people from stepping forward? And I look at, you know, how did I end up in the roles I ended up in? Because I didn't kind of, you know, wake up with any burning ambition to be chairperson of Cork County Board. You know, it was something that evolved, but it was because I was encouraged. I was asked. You know, somebody said to me, you know, the first role I got involved in outside the club was PRO of the divisional board, and there was a vacancy coming up in it, and someone said, you know, you might have the skills for that, would you give it a go? Actually, the same way that I got involved in my own club, someone asked me to do it, and you know, I was encouraged, and I was encouraged all along the route of my administrative journey. I was asked, it was suggested, I was the only one, will say, when it came to vice chair of Cork County Board, that was a decision I had to make myself, basically, whether I wanted to run for it or not, knowing that I would end up as county chairperson. But in everything else, I was encouraged along the way, and I really think that is the message out there. And it's particularly women. The studies would show this: women are less likely to put themselves forward for roles, and less likely, you know, in the working world, less likely to apply for a job unless they meet all of the criteria, you know. And we're probably, all of the women on the panel are probably a little bit familiar with imposter syndrome and all the rest of it. So it is really important that maybe the men too, no, lads, sorry, I don't want to discriminate against you.
Certainly are, Tracy.
Very much. I suppose it is really important that we encourage people, that we sit down, you know, as people involved in our own clubs, and we say, here's somebody who might be good at that level, and that we encourage them to step forward, and and higher up the levels as well, that we do target people. And then the other thing is to support them, because there is no point in asking somebody to take on a role outside the club that might be a bigger role and not having the support that they need, you know. And I have to say that, you know, there were a lot of disasters during my term as a county board officer in Cork, and I knew all the time that there was support there for me if I needed it, you know, and I think that is important as well. But encouraging people to maybe take that step up, saying to them, look, you would be good at that role, you would be able to do it, that's really, really important.
For fear you felt left out, Diarmuid, we'll give you the last word on this panel, imagine. Following on from what Tracy said there, yeah, it's so important that people are asked to do it, that also people feel supported to do it, but also that people feel brave enough and encouraged enough to put their hand up if they're interested. But also, you might feel a little bit less of this because you played county. People say, of course Diarmuid Lyng is off helping kids coaching, of course he's involved in club and county, but you don't have to have been a county hurler or Komogi player to go up the ranks of administration. I think that's a message probably that might need to be rammed home. The imposter syndrome might fall to those people as well, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who among anybody who's tuned in here who doesn't feel that the imposter syndrome, male or female, at some stage when they're going to do something at an administrative level, to play the game themselves, like to get people involved, to get more people involved, to ask people to see what skills are required, and to be able to look and say, okay, these are the people we need for the job. Those mechanisms are maybe they're more suited probably to somebody like Tracy, who can see those things, and in her answers in the last piece is very clear. I don't see that side of the game as much. What I see is the potential for a greater vision of the community and what the community is. And I think one of the traps that we fall into in the GA is we talk about community an awful lot, and we sell ourselves in the community an awful lot. But sometimes that's limited very much to the GA community and not to the entire community, and often even at a cost to the entire community, where we almost shut our doors. Or we all know the familiar moment of walking into the club bar or whatever it is, and everybody turns around and you're like, well, Ginny, do I belong in here at all? And you could be in there for 20 years. So opening our doors to the community and realizing the impact we can have in the community, particularly at this time, I think never more so, is there a greater possibility to show people around the country, like people in communities, older people in rural areas, when the likes of Ursula is out in Owlert running the roads and the lads are doing it on their own and they're in their own place and they're out taking part and driving the community forward in a way, but that they're seeing, that you look out the window and that you see that type of energy in your community. That's the type of thing that I think brings people in and makes people curious. And when they arrive in the door, if they arrive in with curiosity, and if they arrive in with energy, if they arrive in with enthusiasm, I think they'll find those roles automatically. Now, this is why I said at the start, this is where you have somebody like Tracy who says, okay, I see these skills that you have and I see the need for this job at that level. And we need those people and we need the questions to be asked. But how do we bring people in the door with an enthusiasm and an openness to try? I suppose that's where I think that's where I think the great possibility is. And then we let the more skillful the more skillful people take over and see what roles they need to fulfill.
And I think that's a really good message to finish up on this morning, everyone, on this section of the forum, because that's the thing, isn't it? Push open that door and then God knows what possibilities you might find behind it. It's just finding that little bit of inner strength to be brave enough to push open the door and go into the clubhouse, even if it's not yours. I can only dream to be part of a club that actually had a clubhouse with a bar. My God, you guys are rich, Diarmuid. But listen, everyone, do please stay with us. I just do want to thank Tracy, Ursula, Diarmuid, August, David. Do stay with us because the morning does continue. And straight away now, without break or further ado, we're going straight into the first workshop, and that's going to be with Sabrina Stewart, August, David, Gough. But for me, Goramila Mila Mahagui, it's been a great honour and privilege to be here, Armagh, and do stay tuned for the rest of the day.
Hello there, folks. Stuart here from the Komogi Association. Lovely to see you all. Thanks for joining us all for the Go Games workshop. You're just gonna have to give me 1 second here. I've had to change onto my iPad, and I'm trying to find where my presentation is gone, and very awkwardly, it's not coming up. So just give me 1 second there, and I will try and share my screen with you as soon as I can. Technology is only ever good if it works. Okay, apologies for the delay there, folks. We got there in the end. So, as I said, my name is Stuart. I'm the Participation and Growth Coordinator for the Komogi Association down in Munster. And I'm going to be taking you through the Go Games and just a little bit about the ethos, the reasons why we do it, and just some practical applications for coaches of how you and coaches and administrators down on the ground as to how you can improve it whenever you're trying to do it into your counties. So in terms of what we're looking for, it's titled the what, the why, and the how, and I think all these things are very, very interrelated. in terms of getting the most out of the Go games. So my previous jobs would have been in Scotland and Wales in terms of working with primary schools and high schools, and it's the exact same ethos in terms of the Go games age group for all the sports over there. So everything that's happening here is happening over there too. So it's important we get this right, and sometimes it's good just to start with a reminder of the Go games. You know, what's Go games? What does it stand for? It sounds pretty simple, but the ethos behind it was every child gets a go for the entire game. And that was really the founding principle behind it, is that the kids have to be playing. So that's why it was named Go Games. So every kid is supposed to get a go for the entire game. The ethos of the Go Games, the two main things were to promote full participation, as we just said. So everyone's supposed to play as much as they can, and then varying catering for the developmental needs of young players. So in terms of the first one, the full participation is that regardless of age, age and stage, smaller numbers on the pitch are better. Smaller numbers and more teams are much better than having big teams and loads of players on the pitch. We go into a bit more into the detail after that, but that was very much the thing, was that players respond a lot better at young ages in terms of skill development to small-sided games than they do from big-sided games. It's a bit of a cultural shift, that one. The second one was the developmental needs. So the rules are scheduled the way they're scheduled in terms of kind of for 6 and 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. The rules and the equipment is adapted for the developmental needs of the young players, and they should be progressed all the way through. We start with the bigger ball and just ground striking to develop those basic skills, and then we go up and the ball gets slightly smaller as they go. So it's very much ensuring we stick to that. The principles that they play the full game are set in stone, or they should be set in stone, along with not awarding the medals and the trophies. It's just trying to redefine what winning is at that age group, which again we touch on just a little bit afterwards. So the benefits, we're looking at research was initially done by Niall Moyne and DCU. The benefits of the Go games, so you were talking of increased enjoyment, increased number of touches on the ball, increased physical work rate, and increased perception of confidence. So it was really important in terms of, it's not for us as adults to decide what's the right way to develop kids. We should be listening to the experts and listening to the evidence. You know, coaching and development is an expertise in itself, and we need to be listening to what the best practice is for that. So when you do Go games right, and you have your small numbers and more teams, number 4 there, the increased perception of confidence, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the girls or the boys that are playing the Go games to feel that they're getting better and feel that they're progressing. If numbers 1, 2, and 3 are hit, number 4 will be hit as a result of that. So they want to enjoy it. The more touches they get, the more they get a chance to develop their skills. Being on the pitch is not important in terms of if they don't touch the ball. So just being on the pitch is not going to improve them, and it's not going to make them happier. They have to be enjoying what they're doing. So they have to be competent by actually touching the ball, and just putting more players on the pitch doesn't make it work. Meaningful involvement in play is the key. And in terms of the pitch size as well is important in that. So if the pitch is too small, it'll be really congested and it won't encourage long striking, for example. But if the pitch is too big, they'll just become tired and they'll be involved less because they've got longer to go to reach the ball. And mismatches become a bit more emphasized because one player, if there's more space, one player can just kind of run around and do a load of work. So it's making sure the pitch is right for what you're looking for as well. So a little question for you. Hopefully you can't see the answers. So we're looked at why do children and young people participate in sport, and why do children and young people drop out of sport? This was based on a survey of 20,000 young people between the ages of 12 and 14, and also some research that we did ourselves in the Komogi. So the reasons why children and young people participate in sport, the top answers were, so fun was the top one, and that's a really important thing we need to remember all the time, is that fun and enjoyment comes absolutely first, and it comes first all the time, no matter what we ask them, or what group of children we ask. Improve their skills, get fit to play as part of a team, and for the challenge of kind of being part of a team. The reasons they drop out are the complete opposite. It's the pressure to win, it's the pressure to train, and they wanted to do other things. Because Komogi and Jay wasn't enjoyable, or the sport themselves wasn't enjoyable, they decided to do other things because they were getting pressure too much to win, pressure too much to train. And that's a really important thing I think we have to realize. We did a Komogi specific survey, and it was when they were when players were allowed to respond anonymously to that, they were very honest in their feedback that they're reporting. It was over 90% were reporting that the amount of pressure they were being put under was extremely off-putting. And in terms of the pressure to just become ramped up, I think people were trying to put professional standards and almost county standards onto club players, and that's a massive issue that we have for this age group. So young children are telling us clear as day that we're putting too much pressure on them. They're not enjoying what they're doing because we as adults and as coaches and as administrators are forgetting the reason that they want to play. Every time we ask when they want to play for fun and they want to enjoy it. They don't care about winning. So that's, I think, something we have to really keep in the back of our head the whole time. So when we look at the role of coach, how can you do that as role of coach? As I mentioned before about kind of redefining winning. We're not taking winning out of it at all, because that comes as a byproduct. You know, kids themselves know, you know, people get competitive. They want to do well. But what is a win at the Go Games level? So winning at Go Games level is learning to compete effectively. And they want to win, but not at all costs. And it's very much through the concerted effort. And the effort is the thing that you can control. When you really focus on the effort, that's something that a player individually can control. A lot of winning is out of their hands individually a lot of the time. There's more people in the pitch, there's conditions, there's loads of things that affect winning, but effort is something that a player is in control of all the time. And if you focus on the effort, and the effort goals the whole time, then the outcome takes care of itself a lot of the time. And especially at the Go Games level, your success is not defined by winning. It's about, are you teaching them the lessons they want to learn? So striving to win and the life lessons, are they, by taking part in the sport, they're learning about persistence, how to deal with adversity, compassion, teamwork, leadership, all these things we really want to emphasize at a young age that will make them better people as well. So if they're getting all that in there, the actual playing the sport at Go Games level, they just want to play and they're trying to develop their skills. So winning is absolutely not important, and it's nice to remember that sometimes, because pressure can be from parents and other people, but you have to remember that as a coach. In terms of what you're looking at yourself to do, now that this one's the one you can't see there very well, is that ensure they have fun. So what can you do as a coach? Just ensure they have fun. That's the top thing. Look at all these pictures, look at how happy they are. If they're having fun, they'll come back and they'll enjoy it. If someone's having a bad day at work or at school, being part of a supportive and enjoyment session can make the world of difference. So you're very much coaching the person and not the sport in that aspect. So just make sure they're enjoying it, because again, you don't know what's happening outside. This might be the best part of their day. Recognize that a positive experience can develop their self-confidence and self-esteem, which is especially an issue with when you get into kind of teenage girls. And equip yourself with the most effective methods and practices. Coaches ask players to improve every day. We ask them to go and improve their skills, work on their fitness, their recovery. We have a duty to improve as a coach, and you have to equip yourself with best practice. You cannot ask them to do all this extra work if you yourself are not going to put in the work to try and become a better coach. It's not fair. And they deserve to get the best coaching they can, and that's up to you to help that. And you as a coach have a duty to help them improve. It's very easy to write players off at a young age. Oh, they're not good enough, they'll never make it. That's rubbish, especially at Go Games level. That's complete nonsense. There's never ever a lost cause at this age group. You as a coach, you're there to help them improve, and you deserve to give them the time. They're giving you their time to come there. They deserve the time from you as well. And success as a coach, as we say, it's not about winning. Success as a coach at Go Games level is ultimately measured by whether or not they return to your sessions. If they keep on coming back, you've done something right. The massive drop off is at 12 years old, and there's no coincidence it's at that 12 years old age group, because we come from non-competitive screaming into competitive, and it's just if it's not done well, that's when they're going to start leaving. So how can we do it? Some little tips for you in terms of make them all play in the full game. So again, being on the pitch is not the same as meaningful involvement. So if you've got some question we have a lot of time is if you have too many players for one team but not enough for two, a normal size team, just make two smaller teams. You're much better off having two smaller teams and everyone gets loads of touches of the ball than having 4 or 5 subs standing there doing absolutely nothing. Make sure activities are structured in a manner of fun, so friendship, fair play, and that's very much by you in terms of the coach, the attitude you're putting over to them. Again, making the pitch bigger is not the answer. It goes against the principles on getting loads of players onto it. It's not the way you're looking for it. Small-sided games are the way forward in terms of touches of the ball and making sure they enjoy what they're doing. Mastering the basic skills. So you want to make sure at the very basic level as Go Games, all you're trying to do is make sure that they master the very basic skills, or keep on trying to master the basic skills on the left side and the right side of the body. That's as much as you have to be doing. They don't have to get it all the time. They're just practicing left side, right side, every single skill they're practicing, and the sense of accomplishment that they'll get from that is really, really good. The player pathway is a guide for what players should be doing or how they should be proficient at different ages, but it's very individual. It's not a linear process. Some players develop higher than others. So the player pathway is a guide for what they should be at certain ages, or what they should be competent at, but it can be a sliding scale depending on the maturity. So as long as you create the correct environment and keep on encouraging the practice of skills of both sides, they'll get there eventually. Nobody should be written off at a young age, and they will get there eventually. But some will just need a bit more work and a bit more patience and time than other ones will. So it's never set in stone. In terms of everybody having the getting involved in the Go game should be adhere to the key principles. So that can be done quite easy a lot of time with a parents meeting. So a lot of clubs that we work with, some will have parents meetings at the start of the year where they set this out, because there's no point you as a coach in a club having this great ethos and environment if you turn up to a blitz and parents start shouting abuse and just start doing nonsense. If you have this meeting, you set your stall out and you say, this is how we're going to behave, and this is how we're going to approach it. If some bad behavior does happen on the sidelines, you've got a reference point to go and correct that behavior. So if you don't have the reference point, it can be quite confrontational. Just remember what we said at the start of the year, and then they'll remind themselves, and they should just hopefully calm themselves down in terms of doing that. And there was just a couple of little coaching tools that we had for you at the end there. So in terms of effort goals, if you focus on the effort as opposed to the outcome, the effort goals are motivated because players can control them and they can easily see when the progress is being made. You can then stretch these goals once they achieve it. So for example, striking the ball well off both sides is the outcome. That's where you eventually want to get to. But the effort involved in doing those things is the correct setup, the C-shaped swing, the correct ball toss. If they focus on hitting those 3 points in sequence, eventually the strike is going to come. But if they just focus on the strike, a lot of the time it can break down. So it's just an example of just focus on the effort and then just chip away at it, break it down, and then eventually they will get there. Last one I had for you is just a little effort log. So this is something that, again, it's not an outcome for skills. It's very much about, have they turned up? They get a point for attending, they get a point for their effort, they get a point for good behavior, a point for good attitude, a point for have they helped others, did they encourage somebody? And if somebody has a bad day, which happens with kids, and they're quite upset at the end of it, you can use it and say, well, look, I gave you 10 points because you did this, 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 and this. All of a sudden you're perking them up, you're making them have a better day because it's not focused on the outcomes. The effort they can control, and they might not even notice they've done it. So that's me finished. And just my last one here is that for a closing statement is, remember who the Go games are for. Whenever we say anything or do any research, the kids play for fun. Winning is not the primary motivation, and they would prefer to play and lose than win and not play. So that's just that they need to be playing. And they need to be on the pitch, and they need to be touching the ball with meaningful involvement. Smaller is always better. Less players, smaller numbers, it's more player involvement, and it makes for happier and more competent players. We redefine what winning is, and we never write them off. And success at Go Games is always judged on, are they coming back and are they having fun? If they do, and they are, then excellent, you've done your job well. So thanks again for that, folks. I hope you found it interesting. Any questions, please just fire them into the chat box and we'll answer anything else at the end. And apologies for my rubbish presentation. This looks a lot better in PowerPoint, so we'll send it on to you. And these last 3 slides are in the resource pack as well for you. So I'm going to stop waffling and I'm going to hand you on to Sabrina and David.
Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Sabrina Larkin. I'm the Leinster Participation and Growth Officer of the Komogi Association. So first of all, I suppose just to touch on what Diarmuid said there earlier on is that I suppose as development staff, we have a great opportunity now at the minute to be able to focus on the actual basics of the game. And I suppose it's after coming up there in the Go games, it came up in the discussion earlier on, that we can kind of get back to the basics, get back to the fun part of the game and the growth of the game as opposed to this win at all costs attitude. So Stuart has touched on it in the Go games side of it, and now I'm going to go through club school links. So there's been an awful lot of work done on club school links over the past maybe 12 to 18 months. We're delighted to have with us today David Gough, who's a renowned referee, obviously. But also he sits as the chair in the Dublin Cumann and Munskull. So it's great that we have his insight. He's going to give us some insight maybe from the teacher's point of view and from the school's point of view of what they might be looking at for setting up of a club school link. So basically, what is club school link? I'm going to take you through what it is, and for the purpose of today's presentation we focus at primary school level. It's not necessarily just applicable there. If your club decide maybe it's secondary school you need to go target, then that's applicable there too. But for today, we're going to focus on primary, and I've got 5 key steps just for today's shortened presentation as to how you as a club or you as a county might implement the club school link. So what is it basically? It does exactly what it says in the tin. So it's basically about building a relationship between the club and the school that you can all work together to get involved in the game. Now, many of you might have club school links already set up. Many of you sitting back thinking about it might think, oh yeah, sure, your man goes in or your one goes in and coaches for 6 weeks every season. So what I wanted to point across here is that it doesn't always have to be just coaching, okay? And we'll touch on that a little bit later on. You really sit down as a club and you decide what is applicable to you, what's possible for you, and where you want to get the best out of it for your club. So just to bear in mind throughout this, that it's not just coaching. You can think outside the box. So why would you have one? Basically, it's to get your club known in the local community, whether that's in one feeder school or you might be in an urban area where there could be 10 primary schools feeding into your club potentially. So it's about getting your club out there, being present in the community. A lot of the conversation of the past hour or so has been about community. It's about really bedding yourself in as a vital part of that community environment. Then of course, obviously it's about giving the girls the opportunity to get involved in the game. So the first part of that sentence, basic enough, just get involved in the game. But we all know that our girls and our students and everything go into school to learn. It's somewhere that they go knowing that they don't have all the answers yet. They don't know how to do everything yet. They haven't fulfilled the curriculum yet. So it's somewhere that they go and they know it's safe to learn, and it's there for a perfect environment for us to be able to capture the imagination of girls who might not go, oh, I don't know how to do all the skills of Komogi. They know they're there to learn, and it may be more fun-focused, skill-based place that they can go and learn. Finally, then, from the school's point of view, it can help them reach green flags, healthy weeks and everything else. And as a club, to recruit players, maybe it might even be to provide additional coaching to players that they already have. So if you're sitting down as a club and you think, okay, well, our under-10s could do with a bit more exposure to skills, then that's a perfect opportunity to approach them in the schools as well. And finally, then, it can also help to recruit parents and coaches. If parents see that you have taken an active involvement, an active interest in the school and in the students, they might therefore pay it back in spades by getting involved in the club as administrators, as Tracy was saying earlier on, or as coaches, which are sometimes hard to recruit at the best of times, okay? So what can it look like? Like I said earlier, it doesn't have to just mean coaching. So it can be, coaching can be done and delivered in different ways. It can be a 6-week block every couple of weeks. It can be one session every 2 weeks if you're spreading it out across a lot of clubs or a lot of schools, sorry. But ordinarily as well, it can also be sharing facilities that the club might use, the school facilities for their sign-up night, or the school might use the club for its sports day or something like that, okay? They can also then, depending on what you can realistically deliver as a club, it might literally just be an annual visit where the club administrators or the club players might go in and visit the school to introduce themselves, tell them what time they train at, what evenings they train, when their open night is, who the children's officer is, or it might be running a health week for the school. Also then, it could just simply be a games program. There might not be the opportunity to deliver coaching in a very structured way, so it might be a games program of a parish league or a school league or a lunchtime league, okay? So the point I'm trying to get across there is it doesn't have to be a very structured block of coaching. It can be so many other things based on you and your school's level of interest and a level of engagement. So basically, I have 5 steps here. I'm going to spend some time on this slide. Then I'm just going to give you some practical tips, and then David might come in with some information from the school's point of view. So basically, to identify I'm looking at you to identify the schools in your catchment area. So these are 5 steps for the purpose of today's presentation to make it easier to explain. So identify the schools in your area. You can do this through the schools database. So every county development officer in the country would have been sent a schools database that Louise has done an awful lot of work on, with a list of all the primary schools, secondary schools, third level that are there in your county. So you can sit down and realistically say, right, what schools can we approach? What schools do we have time to go to, etc. The second part is to recruit reliable volunteers or coaches. Okay, now this is really important. I've had a couple of club school links that have come back, and maybe the person didn't fully understand that their role was to be consistent in time management and the communication that they might use or the language they might use in the school environment. So that's really, really important, is to recruit the right people, and they have to build up. The third step is actually going and contacting the school. So this is where you might write, call or visit. You'll sit down with the principal. Sometimes they'll have a PE coordinator or a teacher who will look after the sports side of things in the school. And this is an important step, because this is the thing that sets up that connection and that relationship between the two. It's about then deciding what you're willing to partake in from a club point of view, what resources you have, what coaches you have, what time you have, but equally the school, what they're willing to get involved in, and what they're willing to commit to as well. So the strength of this will really determine the outcome of the club school link. Then it's the fun part. It's actually getting involved, getting hands-on, and getting involved in the school, whether that's from putting up simple step of putting up a notice board inside the school hallway that has the times or the coaches' names or pictures or events that's coming up. It can literally be as simple as that, or going into your actual structured coaching program. And this is the fun part. This is the activity part. The final step then is step 5, and it's something that I really want to kind of hammer home, is basically that link between the club and the school. So myself and Stuart would have seen an awful lot of club school links roll out, and this is a place where it often comes to have a bit of a downfall, because they do all of this work in steps 1 to 4, and then the very last step is kind of like, oh, should we just crack on with the club now, you know? And this part is really, really important to get the most out of your club school link that you set up. So what I'm going to do is give you an example. So the exact same rollout of a club school link. There's a club, it's doing 2 local primary schools that feed into it. The principal's on board, they're doing 2 sessions a week for 4 weeks. In this case, in case 1, once the 4 weeks of coaching has stopped, the club takes up the majority of the time of the coach, and off they go back to the club and they crack on with the club scene. What happens from that? Brilliant. This is a good club school link. They've got 8 new members in from the primary school. The school got its green flag, and the link program is now going to move on to St. Mary's or St. John's down the road next year. Okay, that's a good one, but it's about basically finding out how you can make it great for you, most beneficial for you and the school. So the exact same thing, but once the four weeks was complete, the club ran a parish league. Okay, they went off and they got the schools that were involved in to play a league format participation blitz. They went and approached the local secondary school. They got TYs involved to run the event, to do the promotional side of it, social media, etc. And then they went off, and just before the club scene took off, they ran a recruitment night and a parents' coffee morning. What happened? They got way more new members. They showed way more involvement and engagement in the actual students. From the secondary school point of view, 3 girls were there going, "Chiz, I gave up there 2 years ago because I was just fed up of it, but I had great crack running that event. I want to get back involved." Their successful parent night ended up recruiting 3 new coaches, and the school still got its green flag, and the program continued in that school and expanded into more schools. So it's just an example, a very simple example of how it can be good versus great. Okay, I suppose then, just for me to finish up, and I suppose David can come in then on anything that we as Komogi people might have missed from a school's, from the teacher side of the table, shall we say. So it's just to know what success is for your club. And that's part of the step 1. What are you looking to measure success on? So Like I said, it's easy to have a good one, but to have a really great, successful one is the challenge, okay? So is your aim to recruit more players? Is your aim to get more coaching into the girls that you already have playing? Is it about your place in the community? What is your ultimate success outcome? All right. As teachers or as parents, the really important thing that they're looking for in their day is that the people coming into the school are consistent. Teachers like people who are consistent and who have planning. And I suppose there's lots of them here that tell you that they really want you to be a consistent person. And even if that's just in visits or events, you really need to just build up a strong relationship in that sense. Like I said earlier on, and I can't say it enough, step 5 is as important as step 1, and it's a downfall of many clubs. So really concentrate, even if you're halfway through your club schooling, concentrate on, right, how are we going to manifest this into the club grounds? Make your club impossible not to see. I think I'm after kind of getting that point across. You know, this should be at the back of the person who's going into the school's mind at all times. And I suppose then obviously we have to address COVID times. If and when we get back to schools, you know, principals might have the distraction of having to really concentrate on academics or catch up on academics. So as Komogi people, as sports people going in, you need to think outside the box a little bit. That might be the club running an online school challenge, skills challenge, a virtual tour of the club. It's just to maybe think outside the box when it comes to reconnecting with our schools post-COVID. Finally, these are the couple of resources that we have, and as you see on the right-hand column, these will be resent out to the county development officers or yourselves after the presentation or after today. The database that I spoke of, the GA staff, so every GA staff would have a rota of schools that they deliver coaching in, so it's really important to check in with them, see where they are. Is there additional coaching needed, or are you better off spending your time in a school that they might not necessarily be in? There's a giant Komogi poster you can put up on your school notice boards, and a scheduling evaluation sheet, just as an example of how you might schedule coaching sessions or coaching program in your schools that you go to. So I suppose that's just a couple of resources that we sent to you. I just call on David there if he wants to turn on his camera. He might just give us some insight into maybe the teacher side of the table and what they might be looking for and his own personal experience with Club School Link. And then we'll come back to myself and we'll go for a quick break. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Sabrina. I'm just going to re-emphasize exactly what Sabrina and Stuart have said already, but I'm going to come in from maybe the teachers and principals perspective. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of the Go Games model and the Club School Links in relation to the community, both the school community and the club community. When we talk about Gaelic games in a school context, sometimes people don't realize that it fits in in a small aspect of the overall PE curriculum. And in a 30 week to 32 week school calendar, there are 6 different strands that a teacher would have to teach in the PE curriculum. And we have athletics, aquatics, dance, outdoor and adventure activities, games and gymnastics. So games is 1/6 of that time. So you're only getting a space of maybe 4, maybe 5 weeks to teach games. Within games, then we might have Olympic handball, we might have basketball, we might have soccer, rugby, Gaelic games. So only 1/6 of the 1/6 of a time. So maybe 1 week in any given year is devoted towards Gaelic games in a PE timetable within a school. So it's really important that the club and school work together to provide extra time in the discretionary hours, because Gaelic games is such a huge important part of Irish life. And the teachers and the principals love to see designated liaison persons, GPOs, whatever you want to call them, come in from the club to speak to the staff and the principal and to create that link, to sit down, to discuss ideas, to share resources and to share access to the children. And it's simple stuff at the start of the year where a GDO or someone from the club, a responsible adult designated within the club, comes in and talks to the infants, explains what the GAA club is, where it is, and what sort of resources it can offer to the junior infants. And that's the most basic concept at the beginning of the year in September. you then might discuss with the principal or the teachers on the staff. And I remember in a school like I was in Dublin, there was 32 teachers on my staff. Not all of them were Gaelic Games coaches or in love with Gaelic Games or wanted to promote it outside of the curriculum. So it is important to get people to come in from the club to help promote Gaelic Games, and be that transition year students who are engaging in the TY program within their own second level schools, or coaches or GDOs. The principals will be delighted to allow them access to the kids to develop their skills and go back to the Gold Games model, to allow them an opportunity to play Gaelic Games and engage with Gaelic Games in a fun, enjoyable way, where it's 100% of the children participating 100% of the time. But there are also benefits for the club, and if the club school link is strengthened, the club can then use the school as one of its resource bases. And for an example, if the club wanted to run a coaching development night, that they would have access to the most modern and available resources like interactive whiteboards, warm, insulated environments, desks, chairs, places that are conducive to educational learning. And the club can use those facilities then. Equally, the school will want to use the club's facilities. They will want to use the pitch for their Common Among School leagues or their Go Games blitzes or whatever else, their sports days. And it's about enhancing the community, the sense of community. And Diarmuid talked about it before. We don't want to be shutting doors. We want to be opening doors. And the club and the school can open those doors together and become a strong, you know, to increase a sense of space within the community for Gaelic Games. I sat on both the Go Games Review work group and the creation of the club school link within the games development department inside in Croke Park, and I'm delighted to see this work has come to full fruition, and I'm delighted to see that the Komogi Association is rolling these ideas out today in the development forum, because they have a huge scope going forward. What I would encourage people to do is, sometimes adults, particularly of the older generation, had very negative mindset around schools and going through the school gates. Schools have changed. They're not the same as they were 30 years ago. So I would encourage you not to be afraid to go in to speak to teachers or to principals. Schools are different places now. They're centres of learning. They are happy, positive, enjoyable, fun places to be. And to engage with your school in the local community, and to talk to the people within that school to make both the club and the school a positive place and a successful place. Because when they work together, it's only for the benefit of the full community, and particularly the children that are concerned. So I fully endorse what Sabrina has said, and also what Stuart has said. I'm a full advocate for and passionate about the Go Games model. Here in Dublin, we scrapped our junior leagues almost 15 years ago, and we run our Go Games leagues and Go Games blitzes for the younger children in 3rd, 4th, and some 5th class, depending on age group. And we don't do the finals and presenting of cups. Even when we got to the senior games, we've removed the idea of presenting winners and losers medals. We give everyone the same medal when they get to Croke Park to play in their finals, as a recognition for their achievement. But we always encourage small-sided games and full participation, because there's nothing worse for a child than to be brought down to Bushy Park to play a Go Games match on a Tuesday afternoon and be left sitting on the sideline for 40 minutes. It does nothing for the child's sense of achievement, the child's sense of worth, or the child's own self-confidence. So what I would say is, engage with the Go Games program, get out there, adapt the rules for your needs, but always adapting them to make them smaller, to allow the children participate in the most fun and enjoyable way. And I just wish everyone the very best of luck with engaging with the schools going forward. I hope they're as receptive of places as I tried to sell this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I think we have some time for some questions that came through. Ryan has a few questions there. And then once we have the questions done, everyone can take a quick comfort break for 10 minutes. Okay, so we'll just do the questions first there.
Hiya, folks. With a good Good comment here from Anne Kennedy. She says, for Stuart, I completely agree. My team did not win a single match for 8 years back in the 80s, but we had the best fun traveling around and the love and a great love for the game. Still, of all the girls, with all the girls I know from that time, we are now all involved in the game in a significant way. I suppose, Stuart, do you find with the Go games, one of the biggest challenges for Go games is trying to convince the coaches to buy into the whole philosophy of it? Because I was interested in hearing David comment and David on about the kids outside playing, throwing down the goalposts with their jumpers and playing the game and not worrying about who was winning or losing. But is there a massive challenge there for Go games trying to get the coaches to buy into the philosophy of it?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the hardest things is outside pressure on them. I know what I'm not trying to do here is demonize coaches in any way. We're actually trying to make it easier for you. We're trying to just strip everything back and just say, well, look, if we just all went away, if adults just left the kids to it, what would they do? Exactly what you just said. They just throw down some jumpers, they just play, and they wouldn't bother about anything. They could organize it themselves. So we're actually not that important in the grand scheme of things, but we're trying to make it easier for you. People get very worked up about, someone will comment their skills aren't up to scratch or whatever it is. And outside influences can probably pressurize a coach into starting to do a bit too much. Just always strip it back to, like, are they enjoying it? Are they coming back? And that will everything else will lead off the back of that. Someone else asked a question about how often to train a week. It depends on your group. If they want to train twice a week and they'll turn up twice a week, let them train twice a week. If they'll only turn up once a week, just do it once a week. That's all you can do. You listen to your players. Are they enjoying it? Are they actually turning up? And then that's all you've got to keep in your head. And it can be difficult because, again, every coach won't see it like you do, and they might have different priorities. And that's why we're just trying to emphasize the Go Games ethos in general has to be that it's about fun. And it's about developing their skills at their own pace and what they can do, because outside influences will always try and put pressure on you as coaches, and sometimes it's hard not to cave into that. But again, success, just what is success? Why do they want to play? They want to play because they enjoy it. Smaller sided games and smaller people on the pitch, and they'll be involved more. Meaningful involvement is the main thing. And then, are they coming back? And like you've actually said in that first post, if they're still involved 10 years later, you've done something right at that age group. If they're not involved, it doesn't matter how skillful they are. If they're not playing when they're 15 and 16, it doesn't matter how skillful they were when they were 9 and 10. If they're not still playing the game, it's pointless. Yeah. So yeah.
And I suppose, Stuart, you mentioned about the size of the pitch, and the amount of players playing in each pitch. It's very important that the coaches get that right. I've noticed a lot of let's say soccer clubs and that are actually going down to numbers for, say, under 6s and under 7s. They're maybe going down to 2v2 games or 1v1 games. Do you think that that's maybe something that in Komogi we should maybe look at as well?
I do, and I think a lot of that comes down to communication. Something I probably didn't touch on enough in my presentation was communication between the coaches and the blitz organisers. I think is vital in terms of making sure you've got enough poles, because all it is in Go Games is basically throwing down 2 sets of poles and off you go. Like on a one big pitch, you can have 10 pitches if you really space it out. If you listen to is it Chris van der Hagen at the National Development Forum, he was the Belgian from the Belgian FA. They've gone down to, I think it's 3v3. They go down to at the age of 6 and 7. Now again, the practicalities are difficult because obviously the more teams you have, the more people you need to kind of look after them, and it can be difficult to coordinate. But I think you always have to just put it back to if you coordinate with the blitz organisers and you can match up and you can have enough pitches, then that should literally take care of itself. But I definitely think it is the way we should go. Other sports, rugby, the Belgian soccer, and all the ones that are having success have just done that. They've just stripped the numbers right down, and they're not actually that worried about, I say, coaching them. They're just letting them go. They're just letting them off and making sure they're okay. They're supervising them, and that's all they're doing is supervising, and they do it. So yeah, I definitely think it's been proven by everything in terms of smaller numbers are the way to go.
Cheers, Stuart. And there's a question here from Elaine O'Brien. Could Sabrina explain how a club gets access to a GPO and how that model works? But there's also a comment underneath from Michelle Gold that might give a bit of an answer. Michelle says they set up a Northside Schools coaching initiative, and they are currently in 8 schools. It works really well, but we fundraise for it and apply for funding to pay the coaches. Lots of work, but knowing the coaches in both club and school with a familiar face really helps the young kids. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Sabrina?
Yeah, I suppose, Ryan, this is very subjective, because there's probably people on the call who are in a massive urban area that might have, like I said earlier on, 10 schools that they're feeding into the club, and then there might be someone from a very rural area that might only have one primary school with 30 max kids in it. So from the answer to the first part of the question, I suppose, is that the GPO officers or the GDAs, they're all employees of the GA. So that's what I was saying there in probably the last slide was, you know, we will send out the list of all of those people who are our GA staff, and the best thing to do is to contact them first when you're sitting down as a club and seeing where they are already in coaching. So I suppose sometimes we have this attitude of, oh, we can't approach, or they don't, you know, they don't want us having been extra work on them or whatever, but that's absolutely not the case. We can really build up if we're willing to sit down and just go, okay, well, okay, you're in St. Mary's and St. John's, but there's nobody in the all-girls school, so our Komogi club are going to focus on the all-girls school. Or there might just be a need for additional. So I suppose the answer there is that the GPOs are all GA staff, and like the second lady said, that a lot of Komogi clubs would maybe sit down and say, okay, well, this is something that we really want to make a success. It's something we want to focus on for this year. So they will go out and they fundraise for it. You know, sometimes they can put in for development funding into their provincial councils if that's available to them. There's loads of ways of getting coaches on board. I saw another comment about Manaw coaches. So the Manaw program, can that Manaw coach set up this thing? Well, obviously they can be a lead if it's something additional that they want to do on top of the Manaw program. But to answer the first question, the GA staff, so it's really important to sit down and talk to them and see where they're at, how you can help them, how they can help you, and it can be a very worthwhile relationship that you can build up. And then if you're in a rural area, I suppose you might not have the same access to volunteers or coaches or that, and that's where you might have to actually think the other way of fundraising, or specifically going out and looking for funding for implementing a coach into the school. I hope that answers the question.
Perfect, yeah. We've one from Michelle Gould here again. It can be hard if going into schools in an area with an overlap of clubs, people get possessive and nervous in case of coaching players. Is that something you would have experienced? And I suppose how would you deal with that? You know.
Yeah, David might even have a point on this. I see him smiling there.
Yeah,
but
David, feel free. Yeah.
Obviously. Oh, sorry. Go on, David.
Go ahead, Sabrina.
Obviously, like there is that possession nearly of, oh, that's my primary school or that's my local school. But at the back of it all, we know who our feeder schools are. Like, we know what schools are in our parishes and what schools are in our catchment. Like, and that was the first thing there, was sitting down to think about what's in your area. I suppose that's a bigger problem in the urban city areas, of course. Obviously, they'll have more people and more clubs to want to latch into, I suppose. Dave might have seen that in Dublin, maybe. If you want to go ahead, David.
Yeah, just with my own particular school in Temple Oak, the three clubs in the area were Fogs, who offered hurling, Jude's, who offered hurling and football, and Temple Oak Sing Street, who offered football. And I suppose it was down to the principal to make the decision, you know, which club he was going to align himself with. And for fear of missing out, he aligned himself with two. And that's not to say the children didn't play with the third club. Because depending where they lived, they played with whichever club they wanted. But it was very difficult to navigate those waters, especially if the GDOs don't speak among themselves. I mean, schools would love to have all the GDOs in and all the help they could possibly get. I mean, it's irrelevant to us as teachers or as principals where the children actually go to play their sport at the weekend or at night time. Once that they feel that they belong, that they are welcomed, and that they are having fun. That is the most important thing to teachers, to see that their skills are being developed, and above all else, as Stuart has said many times, that it's fun and enjoyable. But it can be a difficult thing to navigate, and it just means that people need to sit down and talk to one another. And no row or no argument was ever solved without any sort of discussion. And that's what it just needs to be. People just sitting down and having a conversation. An awkward one at the start, but much easier, and positive outcomes can come from that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, David. And Sabrina, we'll have one more. I think this is back to you, Stuart. It's from Geraldine, or sorry, Grania Kavanagh. Hey all, any advice on when kids reach competitive matches from the 12s and having a panel of 20 players and trying to juggle the concept of playing the strongest team versus the weaker teams, and making sure all players are getting a game? So is there, would you recommend, Stuart, maybe mixing the teams and mixing their ability levels, or would you play your strongest team against their strongest team, or weaker ones against their weaker players?
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult question, and it's something that we even struggle with in my own club. We've had the same conversation, we've had the same debate quite often about certain teams. It's very much, it depends on, like, numbers is always going to be an issue. There's always going to be some time where you're going to have substitutes. I think in the first thing, it's making sure that you're rotating the substitutes as much as you can. So even if you have, say, if it's only players on the pitch, so it's only, say, 12 or 13 on the pitch, or 15, then if you have 5 or 6 subs, make sure they get on the pitch. Like, that's the first thing, is make sure if you have substitutes, get them on the pitch at some point during that. It's harder than it is in Go games, because there's generally competitive structures there, but definitely make sure they get on the pitch at some point. And a nice way to do it is just rotate your subs every week or every game, so it's not the same players that are being subs every single time. That's kind of 2 ways you can do it. In terms of having the teams, if you can have them into 2 teams, obviously that's the ideal model. And again, I would very much be of the opinion of mixing your players, not having like the strong team and the weak team. I'd be very much of the opinion of kind of mixing them in, because again, I know there's a bit of an argument between some that sometimes they might not progress, but kids will know. Again, kids aren't daft. Kids straight away will know if they're put into these brackets, they will know straight away. And it can be quite discouraging for a player just to be put into that bracket. As much as you can, keep them mixed, because again, and even in training sessions, your coaching doesn't change. You don't have to have a strong group and a weak group. You're always going to just match to the players anyway, so always have them mixed in. So in terms of that, that's probably the best advice I could give, in terms of if you have substitutes, make sure they get on the pitch, change the substitutes around every single time. And again, it doesn't matter. The hardest thing is that when you're at a game and it's tight and the tendency is to keep it as it is, you have to just resist that temptation. What's good for the long-term benefit of these players is to get on the pitch. Not sure if that answered the question in any way, shape or form.
Yeah, perfect, Stuart. Thank you very much. I think that's it, folks, isn't it? We've a comfort break now.
So just thanks to David for his input there. It's nice to get people sometimes be listening to us enough, and it's nice to get another viewpoint on it who's been there and done that. So thanks, David. So we're just going to take a comfort break now. So if everyone wants to go grab a cup of tea or whatever, get some fresh air for 10 minutes, and we'll be back here at 12 noon, and we'll hand over to Aideen Howland, who's going to look at social Komogi. So go grab a cup of tea and a snack. We'll see you soon.
Hi everyone, it's 12 o'clock, so we'll just keep on going. So as Sabrina said, my name is Aileen Howland and I am the Participation and Retention Coordinator for the Komogi Association. I'm delighted to be here with you this afternoon now as we knock past 12 o'clock. And just before we get started onto some new concepts around social Komogi and recreation Komogi, I just obviously want to reintroduce you to Diarmuid Lyng, a wellbeing facilitator, obviously sports commentator with TG Cahir, and as Máire Treasa alluded to, is a former Wexford hurling captain. So just for the next 5 minutes or that, just after we've had our little break and we're kind of a little bit relaxed, Diarmuid's just going to take you through a small moment of mindfulness, just to prepare ourselves, just to kind of open our thinking a bit. So away you go, Diarmuid.
Thanks, Aileen. I'm conscious that with the morning that we've spent so far, and sometimes when we go into GDAs and GDOs and GPOs and very, I suppose, an intellectually focused ideas at times, that when we can forget to ground in, or we don't get the opportunity necessarily to ground into the very human experience that we all have of opening the doors and going through to our GA club. Through to the place where we meet our young people. So when we sit down to the computer, there are a myriad of opportunities and possibilities, different windows that we have open, social media, all of these things that draw and elicit a certain experience in our body. So we just want to pull back from that for a brief moment. If you can come to a sitting position that is strong. Now, it doesn't have a tension in it, and you don't have to have a straight back necessarily, but not to be hunched over in almost lethargy. To just find a place in your stomach in particular where you feel relaxed but quite strong. And when you're ready at your computer, and regardless of what's happening around you, you can close your eyes and just observe what's happening inside of you. The easiest way to do this is to focus on the breath. Just follow the inflow of air through your nose, feel it filling up your stomach, expanding your chest. Send the air down to all parts of your body, hold it at the top of the breath, and then release it again. Stay with that process of breathing for a few breaths yourself. You will find that your mind may wander. That's fine. Recognize that it has wandered and bring it back to your breath. So inhale through your nose, feel the cool air coming through your nose, feel your chest expand, feel your stomach expand, feel the air go out to all corners of your body. Hold it at the top for a brief moment and then release it again. So just stay in that breathing and notice all aspects of your breathing for a few breaths yourself. Your mind may wander, recognize that it has wandered and bring it back to your breath. Again, if your mind has wandered, bring it back to your breathing. As we sit into our breathing, hold the image of yourself free of effort. There's no effort to do it. Just invite the images to come forward of yourself coming through the door of your GA club, the gates of your GA club, as a young person, as a 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old, wherever you first came in contact with your GA club. Just allow that image to unfold in front of you. It's not a practice of your brain. It's not a practice that you have to conjure up Just sit with your breathing and wait for that image to come. And follow the different images, the different sensations that come up around that. What you are looking for, what you are hoping for, what your expectations are, what your uncertainties are, what you need more than anything else. Again, it's not a practice of the brain. We don't need to control these feelings. Sit with the breath and invite those feelings to come up. Invite the images to come up. Observe the image and then go back to your breath and wait for the next one. Allow the question to arise, what can you do for that young person? What can you, as an older person now, do for your young self in a GA club? What kind of conditions can you provide? How do you need to show up? How are you showing up? Again, through the breath, just wait for those images, wait for those answers to come. Don't answer them with the brain. And now invite the images of your GA club functioning, the place where you play, functioning at its peak, busy, full, games happening, conversations, things that you may feel that are possibilities for the game, for the Komogi Association, for the GA, things that you feel are possible in a GA club based on your own experiences, based on how you feel things can be. Allow the image to come forward of your GA club functioning in its most beautiful, most perfect way. Feel the conditions. See the full spectrum of colours. Hear the sounds. Through the connection with your breath, allow inspirations to come that maybe have never come before. Observe them and then go back to the breath. Come back through the breath into a sense of your own body. From your feet, starting with your toes. Track, feeling the sensations of your body up through your ankles, calves, shins, knees, up to your hips, stomach, chest, shoulders, out to the tips of your fingers, up to the face, right up to the top of your head. Take 3 breaths at this point. Again, fill your body, expand your body out, expand the air out to your fingers, to your toes. Breathe in, fill your body, and release. Same process again. Fill the body with air and release. And the last time, in your own time, fill the body and release. Come back to your screens. To the work that everybody is involved in here. To the great work that everybody is involved in here. And back to Aideen.
Thank you very much for that, Diarmuid. I think definitely slightly sleepy now. Sorry, bear with me. Right, okay, so the kind of reason we're setting that type of tone is that what I'm going to cover in the next 10 to 15 minutes is just potentially challenging our thinking about how we're looking at Komogi currently and what the future might look like. So I've kind of split what I'm about to show you into two kind of areas. So we have kind of factual informational things that are interesting to know, and then towards the end is a little bit more maybe of like where we'd like to see ourselves going. So when we think of retention and dropout, you know, what does it actually mean? It's a huge word, and what does it actually mean in terms of Komogi in particular? So for example, over the last couple of years, I've taken it upon myself to release the Komogi Association Retention Survey. It's a very short survey that we've sent out, and we've engaged around 1,000 people, mainly in the adult population, as I said, over the last couple of years. So we're just trying to gather up people's perceptions and thoughts around retention, around dropout, and what it means for them. On this survey, we provided people with 4 different, you know, varied definitions of retention, and the 2 that you're looking at now proved to be most popular over the last couple of years. So retention is any way in which a player can stay involved with the Komogi Association on and off the field. And retention is any method used to provide an inclusive environment, encouraging all members to remain within the Komogi Association. So on top of this survey, around this time last year, when we felt, you know, opportunities were endless and there would be no restrictions on our lives, we sent out an expression of interest form around social Komogi, again, to try and gather people's thoughts and feelings on it. And one of the questions that we asked was a kind of a word association. So when you saw retention written down, or you heard it in a conversation, what were the words that popped into your head when you heard it? So as you can see, we've got quite a breadth of words. You know, people thought of enjoyment, they thought of fairness, they thought of contribution, striving to improve, managing expectations. So, you know, retention basically is a large field, and even within the isolated environment of Komogi. So as I mentioned, a lot of what the definitions and a lot of that information there came from our adult population, but we also have to be very, very mindful of what our young people think retention is, or what it looks like to them. So coming up on your screen here now is a very small selection of opinions and suggestions that were provided by some teenagers who attended the GAA Youth Forum in 2019. I'm not sure if anyone's aware, but the GAA Youth Forum, it generally runs annually, public health guidelines permitting, obviously, and it is an avenue for 12 to 21-year-olds to come to Croke Park generally to share their thoughts, opinions, suggestions on a huge range of topics. So in this particular year, there was a strong focus on retention, dropout, how to counteract it, what does it actually mean for young people, and they took it to their own youth congress. So part of the day, they held a congress for any of the attendees who are 16 and over. They voted on various topics. They discussed, debated, similar to what we would know our AGMs or our congresses to be. And out of that process is what you see on your screen there now. So they kind of broke it down into 3 areas. So what they could do as a teammate to help a teammate who was considering maybe stepping away, what they'd like to see their coaches do, and what they'd like to see their clubs do in that scenario. So as a teammate, they said that they could, you know, just talk more, encourage, be nice, tell them the downsides of stepping away from sports. So they may lose their friends, they might lose their avenue to be fit, and explain to them that, you know, they'll make friends for life through the club. These teenagers would have liked to see their coach ask players what they thought of the session, reassure them, ensure they know they're valuable, encourage them not to compare themselves. And in a club environment, they hope to see, you know, senior players talking to younger players, showing them that pathway from underage all the way to adult, that the club would listen to the players and actually attempt to address any problems that they came about. So, you know, there's a huge selection of stuff there. And even if, you know, just the 5 points we have across there, what jumps out to me is really all young people are asking is to be listened to be encouraged, and to have a value placed on themselves as a teammate, as a coach, or as a club member. So look, we're all very aware of things that stop us and start us being involved with sport, but I think that the value of the motivators and barriers that you see on the screen at the moment is that they're all coming from Irish scenarios, Irish post-primary school children and primary school children. Thankfully, Dr. Orla Farmer has done a lot of the work for us, in that she has spent a lot of time recently reviewing over 30 studies that were carried out in sport and physical activity in Ireland on that population. And these are kind of the motivators and barriers that jumped out of all that research. So some of the motivators, you can see them there: social interaction, community involvement might be a new one on people. Obviously fun is always there, and Stuart and Sabrina mentioned that obviously. Some of the barriers that are always good to keep an eye on as well, you know, especially in the female population. Body image concerns is generally one, lack of confidence. The negative influence of friends is probably something we maybe don't think about very often. You know, if friends step away, they might step away as a group. And an interesting one for me is lack of choice in activity. And this isn't, you know, like someone maybe in a rural setting who only has a Komogi club to go to, or doesn't have access to, you know, different things that might be in an urban environment. It's actually their lack of input into the activity that they choose to do. So they go to a training session, they're there for 50 minutes and they just do what they're told and they come back. So that was an interesting one to kind of bear in mind. As I said, look, these are just kind of more recent ones and they're based in an Irish setting, but it's not an exhaustive list. And, you know, with that, it brings the added challenge of a solution, a one-size-that-fits-all solution that just doesn't work, unfortunately. So keeping in mind the Irish connection, it's great to see that a kind of a new approach is happening now in Ireland. The Women in Sport section in Sport Ireland is a really active group in promoting, you know, physical activity in the female population. In the last couple of months, they've done a huge amount of work with the Women in Sport division in Sport UK, who carried out this research in the UK a couple of years ago, just into the adolescent population, and trying to figure out their needs and their wants and how we can leverage sport using these 5 anchors that you see on your screen now, how we can leverage those to make the connection that girls have with sport, make that more relevant and more meaningful to their lives. So when we're thinking about creating initiatives or even creating a coaching session or any sort of interaction with young people, it's been found that a lot of young women really want to be involved in a support network. They want to have a sense of independence and opportunity. They want to be socially connected. They want to keep on top of it all, and they're given the opportunity to create their own moments of pride. So they're really important things to think about, and that's exactly what they're looking for. So to kind of achieve these 5 anchors, or to work around the anchors, Sport Ireland, the Women in Sport section, and Women in Sport UK have kind of designed these 8 principles of success. So again, when we think about the environment that young women and adult women step into, we try and create one that's non-judgmental, that invokes a sense of excitement among the people that are there, both the coordinators and the participants. There's a clear emotion and reward. So especially in a female population, this moment of pride or this emotional reward may not necessarily be winning. It may be improving their skills. It may be meeting a new friend, you know, that there's an emotional or a social connection, that their eyes get open to what's actually there, so that there's a step away maybe from the traditional or the competitive, that we try as best we can to build into their existing habits and not add something additional to an already overburdened life. Most importantly for me, that we give girls a voice and a choice. So when they do turn up to the session, they know that there's time set aside for their thoughts and their opinions, that we champion what's in it for them. So again, that emotional or moment of pride, and expand what the image of sporty actually looks like, and kind of make that a bit bigger and more accessible. So with all that in mind, you know, as an association, what are we trying to offer to fill that social and recreational need within our population and any new potential Komogi members? So for the adolescent population, Come On for Fun is an initiative aimed at young women aged 14 to 18 with the opportunity of providing a non-traditional experience of Komogi. So participants in this initiative are invited and actively encouraged to work with the coordinator who's involved to create this experience and make the decisions on what the session would look like that would make it relevant and make it meaningful for them. All the games that take place in Come On for Fun should be small-sided, and time should be allowed each week for social activities, discussion, for the girls to give feedback. Come On for Fun generally should be run for at least around 4 weeks. This allows enough time to build connection, to build some friendships and forge different connections, with the aim of around 60 minutes physical activity per session in line with public guidelines. There's no urgent requirement for a coach in Come On for Fun, so we're more so looking for a coordinator who's willing to work with the participants to create that experience. But, you know, we are aware that if we're trying to encourage girls to get involved, there may be some, you know, fear around the rules of the game or the skills of the game. And with that in mind, we really heavily encourage peer teaching. So if there's girls who maybe know a bit more about the game, that they would take it upon themselves to help the newer girls along. In the end, they'll learn the new skills, but they'll also forge relationships a bit stronger and creates a greater sense of ownership around it again. So a common kind of question we would get asked in this recreational space is about, well, how do we cater for those who, you know, maybe like a little bit of competition? And, you know, initiatives like this don't have to be devoid of competition in any way, shape or form. The thing that has to change is how competition is viewed and the value that we place on the end product of competition. So this is a prime example of where you could get the actual participants involved to set what the competition looks like. So they could have an off-field and an on-field competition. So as an example, on the field, you know, the coordinator could say, right, I'm going to give 2 extra points to the team who continually uses positive feedback towards their own teammates, through the other teams or whatever. Off the field, the participants might say, right, we're going to do a TikTok dance challenge or some sort of other young person relevant social media craze, and that should allow for a more kind of competitive balance within the session as a whole. A core element of Come On for Fun, and this stems from the Sport Ireland Give Young People a Voice workshop that some children's officers may be aware of, is this positive youth development. And it's the 7 C's model that you can see in the bottom hand corner there. And this model believes that by engaging participants in the values of competence, creativity, caring, character, connection, and confidence, that the culmination of these 6 C's will allow the participants to make a greater contribution to their immediate and extended environments. So that's kind of just a whistle-stop tour of what we would hope Come On for Fun would be, but your full booklet will be included in the resources that you will get at the end of the webinar. So a lot of what people think about when they think about, you know, dropout or stepping away from sport, they generally would associate it with that adolescent population, but it also continues to happen in adults, and often they don't see a path to return. So, but there is a growing amount of research kind of into this social space for adults, and a lot of recent research has found that adults who take the plunge and step back into group activities, especially through a sport, are more likely to see an increase in their social skills in other areas of their lives, and an increase in empathy towards others, you know, the life challenges of others. It was also shown that people who engaged in a group activity through a sport were more likely to engage in other group activities. So, you know, if they were, you know, go to coffee mornings or gym classes or other things like that. So with that in mind, we're putting forward the idea of Come On and Chats, which is aimed at adult females aged 25 years and over. It's a socially driven program with the participants and the coordinators encouraged to use the game of Komogi to create a meaningful environment of connection, fun and creativity. Sessions are non-competitive and social activities are the key ingredient to the success of this initiative. So Come On and Chats was developed for a number of reasons to meet a number of growing needs and wants, but we also have received a lot of positive feedback around it from participants who've taken part in the Komogi Association Hurl With Me programme. So the Hurl With Me programme, anyone that might not have come across it, is basically designed for a parent or guardian to learn the skills of Komogi alongside their daughter for about a period of 4 weeks. So it kind of breaks down the fear factor, and a lot of parents or guardians enjoy this kind of pace of learning, and they're keen to continue learning at this social recreational level. And here we are with Come On and Chats, and that's the design behind that. So again, Whistle Stop Tour, the full booklet is available there to have a look at in your resource pack. So a big question is, you know, the Komogi Association, we, you know, nationally and internationally, we organise a lot of games. We organise a lot of traditional games, 15-on-15, championship leagues, etc. So why should we be looking to, you know, maybe move into this space as well, this social and recreational space for our young and our adult females? But as we're seeing from the research, and I'm sure you've heard anecdotally, young people and young adults are actually asking for something like this. They want to see something different. They're aware of what they'd like to see. Young women are becoming increasingly powerful and increasingly confident in their needs and their wants, and only attending activities that actually meet those needs and wants, and that, you know, they seek out that relevance and that meaningful connection. So to take in our mindful moment from earlier on, I want you to sit back again and take a brief look at the pictures you can see on your screen now. Think back to that time when you looked like those girls in the blue bibs in the top corner. For me, I don't know about anybody else, but it definitely wasn't today or yesterday when I was that age. But I definitely will never forget the feeling of the excitement, the nervousness, but also the happiness of being involved, being there, helmet hanging down over my face, couldn't wait to get going. As you move around through the pictures from adolescence to adulthood, the roles that we undertake will change. Playing takes different meaning, and life will challenge every single person in a very different way. But if you take a really close look at all those groups of people, and throughout the journey of being a part of the association, there's one thing that you can always carry through, and that is a smile. Initiatives such as Come On for Fun and Come On and Chats are designed with the participants at the core. They aim to help clubs and communities create environments which welcomes people to experience Komogi, no matter their background, no matter their abilities. We can't shy away from the fact that creating environments like this is no easy feat and will not be easy, and takes perhaps some outside the box thinking and a step away from the traditional norms of how things are run. We need to take confidence in challenging these norms and create a space for growth and for change for the betterment of Komogi and all its members. We all have to try and begin to think of how Komogi really influences our members and our wider community. The power of the role model at local level in particular must never ever be underestimated. The recent research I mentioned by Sport Ireland there included a piece on role models, and the majority of young women involved in that study felt that role models who were relatable and attainable were much more powerful than their elite athlete counterparts. Every person on this call who has interacted with a young adult or a young woman is a role model to that person. We are asking that Komogi clubs lead not by the example of power, but by the power of example, and create a future where young women see Komogi as a complement to their life and a contributor to their holistic selves, so that they may continue to journey on their paths through Komogi. And that is E. So I'm going to invite Diarmuid now to just have a brief chat around his experience of social games and this concept of, you know, returning to play. Thanks
very much, Aideen. there's just so much in that. It's really hard to, yeah, I feel like kind of sitting and taking it in for a little bit more than talking my way through it. There's just so much value in it. There's so much value in that call, Aideen, for the future of our young people. Why I am here, I suppose, is because I haven't played the game. One thing that I noticed when it got to a lot of different levels with the club and with the county, that what I observed in myself and people closest to me was the enjoyment seemed to be very limited, and I thought that was a strange thing. There may have been great enjoyment in the aftermath of a victory. There seemed to be a bit of enjoyment in the fact that you could play, but fundamentally something that we chose to do seemed to be creating a stress on people, and I didn't see the telltale signs of joy in how they were going about their gacha, as you'd say. Their physical bodies didn't seem to be responding with joy to this thing they'd chosen to do. So I found that a strange thing, and I began to look through my experiences the whole way up along to see why maybe that was. Tracy Kennedy referenced a very important study from Selena McCoy with the ESRI, and this is undoubtedly the next evolution. And we talk about these evolutions in sport, about the physical exercise, physical preparation, long training, long runs maybe in the 70s and the 90s, gym culture, and how that came in and impacted the game. Right up now, maybe those for the male game, maybe in the 90s, certainly more prevalent in Komogi from probably prior to 2010, but certainly has intensified since then. And one of the things that study alludes to, and also I can see from Munster, from Ireland, from Dublin, footballers, Cork hurlers have all gone towards, they've moved away from the notion of a sports psychologist in the mechanical sense of one, and they're much more geared now. They're hiring people who can facilitate human connection. Connection is what we're looking for. How to build connection to ourselves. I'd say fundamentally connection to ourselves, connection to each other in terms of our team, and then connection to the world outside, the connection to the game, connection to the natural world around us as well. At this point, I think that the Komogi Association is ideally placed. I think the men's game has gone too far down a certain track, and I would be very concerned for the men's game. I would have been far more concerned had the lockdown and COVID-19 not happened. I think we're actually going to return now to closer to roots of gratitude that should be at the centre of our game. But I think we're, as an association, the Komogi Association is ideally placed to take on this question. Or to take on this challenge in a kind of a bold way. Social games are definitely one of those ways. Aideen has spelled it all out perfectly. There's very little to add to it, except that I would say our place, this is one of the fundamental areas of connection. You look at you look at the poets and the writers, and you like, what breeds connection, what breeds a sense of place. Do it for the parish. I mean, that's a grand way, but that's not what young people are looking for now. They're looking for a deep sense of connection. If we can, the social games, there's an impact. It's not maybe my place to know necessarily about GA, Komogi Association, insurance, where we play the game and where we're covered. The mechanics of it, they are important, and they have to be addressed by the people of the clubs, unquestionably. But what I would encourage is to go out into our places. Our places are full of the history of our people, of the history of our family and of the ancestors of the area, battles that took place, holy places that people gathered, forests, mountains, rivers, streams. Like, there's such a rich variety in our places, and sometimes we limit the notion of a club and a community that the club is to this little small field of squares and cones and drills, and we're losing an opportunity to connect in a deeper way, I think. So the boldness that's required, I think, is to step outside of that notion, to build connection outside, to know our place in a deeper way. And I think when we go out into these places, we connect more fundamentally to each other as well. With the 6 season, I know time-wise, I don't think we really have time to go on to much more. Engagement is one of the central tenets of this as well, and there are plenty of people have plenty of great questions. On the contribution, one of the things I've been creating are just spaces where people are playing, beaches, fields, anywhere that we can, out on the street, like taking back that old notion of play in society, that it's not something that kids do, it's not something that has to be overly structured. David talked about it earlier. Put cones down on a street, on a beach, wherever you have to do it. Step away for the cars. Adults can play. We can play the game again. And I've tried to initiate this on retreats that we run with Wild Irish Retreat, on stags, as you can see up in the top corner. I dressed 25 fellas up as women and played a hurling match in Killarney National Park, and it was the most riveting experience that they've had. And then in the bottom picture there, you can see, like in that picture alone, you've got George O'Connor, Declan Ruth is in there, Kieran, my brother Jack O'Connor, Aoife O'Connor from Katie O'Connor. I mean, there was just Claire, like really high standard of player. But we broke it down to a very simple game where we changed the rules where we needed to, and we allowed it just to flow, and everybody took part. And you can see in the picture, everyone took part joyfully, and that was the central tenet of it. It was pliable, it was movable, the rules weren't hard and fast. We all had the opportunity to change them, but there was movement and there was joy in the game. Now, the C's, the 7 C's, the fundamental one was the contribution at the center of it. The contribution, people have to bring their own energy. So the invite is for their energy to come out. We're fundamentally balls of energy anyway. So what we contribute is based on our willingness to share our energy. So that's the first invite. The competence comes when we create a space, not within the win at all costs philosophy, but when we create a space for learning. In the right picture there, the woman who is about 55, a Wexford woman in the blue jumper, anyone who went to St. Peter's College would recognize her just at the base of the rainbow there. She had never picked a hurl up in her life, had always seen it around her, but never had picked a hurl up in her life. The rules for her, when I was going to tackle her, that's Shiva, who's beside her, was a very good Komogi player. What I was encouraging in the game is Shiva has all of the responsibility in the situation of the tackle here, because the idea has to be that she creates the responsibilities on Shiva to allow enough space for God, her name has gone from my mind, in the tackle. So create enough space where she can learn, but don't give her a free pass either. So it shifts responsibility from I have to get the ball because I want to win the game to, okay, I'm going to tackle here based on what are the needs of this person in front of me. And that's a fundamental shift. I think there are plenty more. I go down through them. Aideen, how time-wise, I'm over. I know, so I don't want to overrun things, but I definitely would like to go down through these if possible.
Another minute or two, and we just have a couple of minutes then for a question or two.
Okay, perfect. So that's building competence, creating the space. Shiva has the responsibility to create the space for the other player to develop their competence. Confidence obviously comes with the arrival of that. Confidence comes with the arrival of, when your competence is increasing. Also for Shiva, I'm encouraging her to create, you're assuming the responsibility on her that she is the better player and she can make these decisions, which builds her own confidence in how she's seen. The connection comes in the joyful experience of it, plain and simple. Character building, again, that type of, it's not about taking home the prize. It's not coming home with the trophy. It's about the journey the whole way along. It's about each moment of interaction, each moment where you see what's happening in front of you, you sum it all up, and then you make you act in accordance with how you're seeing things. So it's a constant invite to presence, a constant invite to connection. That it's caring. I mean, that's the fundamental thing. It's not about you winning. It's about creating the conditions in which everybody around you learns, that which is totally possible. And the creativity, where isn't it in this game and this organization that we have? It's at every level. What I would say is another question that arose in me after leaving the game in the way that I was playing it was, I met so many creative people who were artists, musicians, actors, who said that they loved playing the game. They loved playing the game, but they couldn't stand the fact that they were supposed to hate the person up the road. They couldn't stand the fact that they had to win every game. They just wanted to play, and they didn't feel the conditions were there. And I wonder what kind of an organisation we have now. I mean, we're addressing these questions now, but what kind of a question or what kind of an organisation would we have if Colin McInerney was fundamentally involved in the GAA? What his music would do? What kind of art would we have that arises out of the GAA if we had have held on to those people? So that's the type of future I think that we're building. Competition in the game, I have to say, competition in the game. I feel competition is something that's native to most of us, maybe not everybody, but to most of us. And there is the grounds always for a level of competition that comes from the child, comes from the person who's involved themselves. It's not assumed from outside, it comes from the person inside, and that natural competitiveness is facilitated, but it's not the central focus. Allow for it by all means. I don't think we're going anywhere if we think we're going to remove competitiveness from the sport. I mean, nobody's trying to do that. It really is about allowing for it without forcing it on people. So I just, look at Aideen, I really admire your work. I really admire what you're doing. I really admire how you're going about it. But I would say definitely, and I said it to you in a lovely chat last week, like, be bold in how you go about this, because there's huge potential and huge possibility to deepen our connection, and for our young girls to deepen connection with each other and bring the organisation on in a very, very culturally and socially rich way. And I applaud you for it.
Thanks very much, Jared. James, I think you're keeping an eye on the questions there. Is there anything to chat about?
Yeah, Liam here.
Or Liam, sorry.
Over. Thanks for all the information thus far. Hugely positive feedback in the comments and in the chat box there. Just you would have covered a lot of the information and the questions that came in during the week that were preloaded through the sign-up form, but maybe just one question each, just to squeeze the last little bit of information out of you before we let you go. Aideen, you mentioned come on for fun, come on for fun and come on chats. When these events are taking place in our GAA club grounds, Sandra asks about the implications in terms of insurance and how we ensure that our players and our participants are kept safe and covered. Could you give us that in a word, possibly?
I suppose, as Diarmuid said, the mechanics of such an idea do have to be addressed, and we're lucky in one way in that these are conversations that the GAA are having themselves in regards to this social and recreational space and what it looks like. And I suppose anyone on Twitter or primarily will see there's kind of a growing group of recreational hurlers around the country. So in terms of insurance, the process that we've been advised to undertake is a waiver process. So regardless of being a member or not, we would be asking that anyone willing to participate in these events will sign a waiver. And basically what that means is that if you're participating as an individual, the relevant insurance, the personal injury insurance, our membership or our subscriptions that we would pay of a normal year do not extend to this activity. Now, I suppose the difference between ourselves and the GAA is that our insurance works slightly differently in that the Komogi environment, we kind of insure ourselves independently, albeit with a select number of companies, but each Komogi club is allowed to check with their individual insurers to see if it's something that they would cover. It's generally not, but it's definitely a question worth asking. And look, the more people that start asking the question, perhaps more likely the insurance companies will put something together that would allow us to do it. But yeah, so we have a waiver that's been designed by the insurance department in the GAA. And this states that, you're fully aware by signing your waiver, you're participating at your own risk. We fully advise that you have your own personal accident insurance should something happen. And that, the public liability side of it is covered once that waiver is completed correctly. And an important thing to note that if a club or a group do wish to organise, that they do have to let me know at least 6 weeks in advance, and I will send that on to the insurance department in Croke Park, because or in the GA, sorry, if they aren't aware of activity and God forbid something happened, the kind of paper trail, for want of a better term, is already kind of a little bit off kilter. So that's kind of a bit more clearly explained in the booklet that's available, as I said. So if anyone does have more questions in regards to the mechanics, have a quick read through the booklet, and if it's still a little bit clearer, because it is a small bit of a step away from the norm, again, no worries, throw me an email or shoot me a call, and we can chat through it.
Great. And just to finish this up before I hand back over to yourself, Aideen, Diarmuid, a great question came in here during the week in the sign up form, and around the social Komogi aspect again. Is social Komogi feasible for parents and or mentors who have not played the game, and can it address the fear factor?
Yes, for sure. It can address the fear factor by being the vehicle, by creating the opportunity for somebody to step into their fear. I mean, it's not the Komogi Association or a GA club or anybody else's responsibility to solve the fear factor. That's purely down to an individual to deal with their own fears. All you can do is create the space for them to step in with their fears, and for it to be for not to be a hazardous place that will create even more fear. So the responsibility on the organizational side is just the creation of the container, the creation of a safe space. The fear will be there for sure. I mean, then Colin Kills were talking about that last week, and it was a beautiful point that's really stuck with me, is that they played a game, they were playing a social game, they have their own very active social club, and they played a game against another club, and as a bit of an attempt, and this is the interesting part of it, Liam, I think, like, is when you have a very sharp coach, I guess, or whatever his role was. He said he went into the dressing room before, put all the jerseys out, created the kind of match day scenario, and when everybody got in, the kind of social game, that fun that they had been having, they're kind of looking and said, oh God, I don't know if I want to play now. They felt the nervousness and the tension. And he said, that's the nervousness and the tension that your kids feel every weekend when they go out to play a game. And he gave them that empathetic response to improve them as coaches. And I thought it was a beautiful thing. They played on and they played the game, and they addressed the fear by acknowledging the fact that it existed, and then they moved on past it. So you can create the conditions very simply. The game, that one of the things that I wanted to do with the game that I created was to allow for people who've never played to play beside very good players, because I think that's essential for me, for young people to play 12, 13 years of age with 65-year-olds, that they can both play in the same game. And I think for that, there's a little bit more of a hands-off approach organizationally. Let the players of the game bring in their own rules. Start very basically. You can throw the ball. You don't have to use the hurl. You can run 5 steps, 6 steps, 7 steps, whatever you need to do to start. And then let the skills develop bit by bit. If you're very good starting off, you can play with the normal rules. If you've never played before, you can doctor the rules a little small bit for those people. So it just depends on the group. The kids know themselves. Older people certainly know themselves. If we just step back a little bit and let them create those rules for themselves, certainly you can address both of those and provide very safe conditions within which the fear can be addressed and learning can happen.
Great, fantastic example there from Colm Kills, and if everyone has a look in the chat box there's another such example from Ballybacon actually. Aideen and Diarmuid, thanks so much, and Aideen, back over to you to close out.
Thanks a million for that, Liam. So that kind of brings us to the end of the social Komogi section. A lot of information there. I fully appreciate that. So as I said, if anyone has any more questions, just take a look at your resources and feel free to give me a shout. I want to say a big thank you to Diarmuid. I know he has a challenge of a new little baby girl, so we really appreciate his time. And I'm going to hand you straight over to Pamela and Tracy now, who are going to chat to you a little bit about recruitment and retainment of volunteers. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Aideen.
Thanks very much, Aideen. So as Aideen said, my name is Pamela Purcell and I am the Learning and Development Coordinator for the Komogi Association, and I would like to thank you all for taking time out to attend this workshop this afternoon. And I'd also like to welcome Tracy along with us, and she's going to be here to share some of her experiences and knowledge on this subject. This presentation follows on very nicely from Aideen's workshop, and we're going to concentrate on recruiting and retaining volunteers, but we're going to focus more on the non-player side of the association. This workshop simply aims to give you an opportunity to reflect on how your own club deals with volunteers, and give you some ideas on how to attract some new volunteers and to keep the volunteers that you already have. So we're going to start off nice and simply with basically, why do people volunteer? Within the Gaelic Games family, most people volunteer because they want to give back. They want to give back to the coaches, to the parents, to the committee who help them develop themselves as players and as people. They've also seen where the club has come from and where it's going to, and they want to give back and help the club to develop further. And within all things in Gaelic Games, it's also a family tradition. So we all have those families within our clubs who have different generations involved in every area of the club. Okay, we want to keep those volunteers. Another reason why people volunteer is that their children are involved. So as we know, when people want their children to develop, they will attend all the training, all the matches, and they're actually probably the people who will see where improvements and changes need to be made. The key here is to get mummy involved. If mum's involved, she will bring the whole family along with her. So just a very simple example, if you needed a new underage coach, best thing to do is to send the mums away on a foundation course, child protection course, and simply match them up with an experienced coach and just get them started off, give them a bit of confidence, get them to start taking one drill, and before you know it, you will have a brand new underage coach on your hands who's very willing to take part. If they're not involved in the coaching, or that's not their idea, there's always room for fundraising committee members, and there's no end to the potential of each volunteer. Another reason why people get involved is a social aspect. So the main reason we all started playing Komogi whenever we were young is our friends fight, and that doesn't change when we get older. So we still want to be involved because our friends are involved. So the older we get, we might change our role within the Komogi Association, but we still want to be involved. Another good target here is our newly retired people. So quite often they have more time on their hands. They maybe don't want to lose the social aspect of their life that they had during their work life, and therefore this gives them kind of a new project to deal with. Other people are new to the area, so they want to make new connections with people with similar interests. Another reason why people volunteer is that it actually gives them lots of new skills, and these skills can be used for things like your job applications, and you're often asked, how can you demonstrate your good communication skills, your leadership skills, your teamwork skills, whereas being a volunteer can actually give you these transferable skills. And people will always volunteer where there's something positive, and if your club is a positive place to be, it's something that people will want to be involved in. And then we look at the other side. So why do people maybe not volunteer so often? So the most common reason is that they're either not asked, or that they say they have no time. People will very rarely put themselves forward. Okay, you need to ask them. Or people just don't know how to get involved. So they're keen to be part of your club, but they don't know how to get their foot in the door. Okay, so that's the most common reason why people don't get involved. And the other thing is that they feel they don't have the skills, or they don't have the confidence to put themselves forward. Sometimes the jobs are made to look a little bit more difficult than they actually are, and that's really important for us to have really clear role descriptors and to get the right people doing the right job. Another thing people often find within the Gaelic Games family as well is that once it starts, never going to stop. Once you're in, you can't get out. Okay, and that's really important then, that we have a succession plan in place, that we put people in the right jobs for the right length of time. Okay, we don't let them stay in a job for too long. We give them variety, and that they know that there's an end in sight whenever they get started. So what does a club that promotes volunteerism look like? So just take a moment and think about your own club. Okay, is it a club that attracts volunteers? Is it a place that there's people knocking on your door, dying to get involved in all parts of it? If it is, it probably is friendly. It's probably energetic, it's supportive, it's structured. Okay, it holds club days, volunteer days, social events. It's family orientated, and it's active. So this was particularly evident during all of our lockdowns we've had over the last year, and the clubs have been very active within the community. Okay, it's fair and inclusive, and it's enthusiastic, and it's full of enthusiastic members. So that's what a club that promotes volunteerism looks like. So now we're going to look at different ideas and ways that you can actually recruit some volunteers. Okay, so obviously face-to-face recruitment is the easiest and best ways to get new volunteers on board. Get out, talk to people, make connections, welcome people, find out what their skills are, and use the skills to the best place for them in the club. Okay, however, COVID, that horrible little symbol we get used to seeing now, has made this much less possible. We've had to look at slightly different options for recruiting volunteers over the next year or so. So the first thing is to use all of the possible social media platforms to promote your club, as well as emailing your club. So lots of maybe older members may not have social media, but most people these days do have an email address and will look at their emails. So use these remote methods to keep people informed of all the positions and the tasks and the jobs that are needed within the club. And also use these methods to promote the Komogi initiatives that have come up. So the MNAW programme, the PRO programme, and these are all things to get new volunteers in your clubs. Okay, so the next little picture there represents parents. So usually a good way of getting more volunteers was to focus on parents, as we've said, and usually we were able to send notes home from training or talk to parents on the sideline of training and matches. Now we're going to have to move online. So the idea of using a parent engagement survey. One of the positives that did come out of COVID is many of our parents took up the role as being COVID supervisors. And that's actually helped to get them the foot in the door. And the next thing you know, you have all their contact information, you know they're willing to help, and you're more willing to use them. Other things to get people involved is, as Sabrina's highlighted earlier on today, is using engagement with your local schools. Okay, once you get people on board, you're bringing on more parents. The more players you have, the more parents, the more volunteers you will have. And obviously, when COVID restrictions are finally lifted, we can look back at doing things like our registration nights, our family days, our club days, and even during COVID, we could do things to try to give a positive image of your club, is running simple challenges, fun things for the kids to do. And the next picture here represents our players, so we can't overlook our players. As we've already said, most people will volunteer within your club because they are past players and they want to give back. But at this point, I'm going to say, do not overlook your current players. Not only will they help to attract other volunteers, but they themselves will actually be very good volunteers themselves. So I'll give you an example of our club. I'm part of a one club, so we have 4 senior teams. And there's a rota whereby a male and female senior player attend fundamentals once a week. And what they do is they present a star of the week. Now, the star of the week for that 5 or 6 year old is not obviously for the best player. It's just for the most enthusiastic, or the one who's tried, or the one who attends every week and never misses. It's just a bit of fun. But the engagement that that senior player then has with the junior player is seen then by the parents. There's a real positive image, and actually the parents are more likely to become engaged because they can see the new role model that this person now has in their life. And the other last photograph here again is for retired people. So retired people have more time on their hands, and they want to give back. They want to feel wanted. And quite often they do kind of feel, maybe especially recently retired people, that they lose their place slightly. And while they have lots of time in their hands and they haven't found other things to do, target them, okay, give them a new project, okay, and make them feel wanted. So some other hints whenever we are trying to recruit our volunteers: be specific. Do not say, we need help, can you volunteer? Be very particular about this. Say, can you give 1 hour a week? That's all you're looking for, 1 hour a week. And then identify the areas that you need help with within your club. So this will get people involved. So list the tasks and events you require help with, whether it's the lotto or coaching, whether it's just to wash a set of jerseys or to help with the car parking or refreshments. Okay, include this list then on your registration form of both the child and the adult. Okay, people are more likely to say, okay, I'll do 1 hour a week and I can do that. It's much more, you're more likely to get people involved. Another thing you could do is on your registration form, include occupation. This really helps when you're trying to find out what type of people to approach. and what skills people have, that maybe you don't know someone so well, you don't know some of the parents. If you know their occupation, you then may be able to use their skills. So for example, working in IT, maybe they might be able to help out with your website, something as simple as that. Now, people are normally very reluctant to join committees. So at this point, I'm going to ask Tracy to come in here with her vast amount of experience in this area and ask that you have any good ideas or the best way to approach people and ask them to join committees.
Thanks, Pamela. At this stage, I never again want to be on a committee. Can I just say that's absolutely had my fill of them. No, I'm only joking. I just want a month off before I'm on the next one. I suppose just one thing about this slide, particularly, just be honest. If you are asking people to give 1 hour, then that's what it has to be. And I think maybe we've all done that as well, maybe played down the role a little bit. And certainly some roles, yes, you can tie in 1 hour a week with, but others you can't. And I think you do have to be very honest with people in relation to that, because otherwise they'll just say, oh, they asked me to do an hour and it turned out to be 4 hours, I'm never doing that again, and they'll tell other people. So just be careful around that one. I think it's really important. Now, Diarmuid alluded to this as well, and probably far more eloquently than I can, but I think it is really important that when we're looking to recruit people, that we think outside the box and outside our traditional catchment of people. Our communities are changing. I think that's particularly true in rural communities. It maybe has happened faster in urban ones, but we do have to actively think about approaching newcomers in our communities, people who don't have a traditional attachment to the club, and how we can attract those. I think that's really very important, that we make that effort and that we don't write somebody off because they have no connection to the area. And that might mean going out and, you know, obviously in post-COVID times, you know, running some kind of a fun event, something like that, that can attract people to your club. It might mean making connections through the school or whatever the case may be, but try to approach those people if you can at all. When I was preparing for interview for my current school principal's role, somebody said to me, the best PR a school can have is the stories the children tell at home. And I think that's equally true when it comes to our clubs. Like, the best PR we can have as clubs is what people are saying about us and what our current volunteers are saying about us. So it is important as well that, you know, the people attached to our clubs currently have a good experience, because they'll be talking about that experience in, you know, their friend groups, their families and so on, and we've a better chance of getting people in that way. But I think it is really, really important that our clubs are a place for everyone, and that people do feel that anyone can be part of it, and that you don't have that sensation. Diarmuid was describing going into the club bar. Well, you know, for me in the early days it was going into the club room, and we didn't have a bar in our club. But you know, you don't want people to come into a meeting going, oh, you know, I always remember my first meeting of our own club. They were having a discussion about the relative merits of 10-10-20 or some other fertilizer, and I was sitting there going, I have absolutely nothing to contribute here. Now, luckily they moved on, but it's just important that we create that welcoming atmosphere as well. So back to you, Pamela.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Thank you. So now we've got our volunteers in the door, we've attracted them. The next thing we're going to concentrate on is how we develop them. So it is really important to train volunteers. This is supportive, and it's not meant in any way as a negative, and it can take up time, but it is so important to do. Volunteers can feel very lost, or they don't know what to do or what's expected of them, and there's so much information out there. So on the Komogi website, there's loads of information. There is guidebooks. There's also loads of information on the initiatives we run for volunteers. So things like our Mana programme, the PRO programme, and all information is on there as well. We also are part of the Club Leadership Development Programme, which is the LGFA, GA and Komogi joint training for officers. And this has been run really successfully this year. And thankfully, we've had a huge uptake from our Komogi members this year. And we also run lots of Komogi training events, and event planning, inclusion will all be rolled out this year as well for all our clubs. We will also stick to our traditional training roles. So we'll be having coaching courses, child protection courses. And there's also a huge opportunity here to allow your current and really experienced volunteers to become mentors for the new volunteers and help to guide them and give them the development they need, and just lead them slightly in their new role. So once we have our volunteers and we have them developed, we want to keep them. And some of the The small things in life make all the difference. Okay, and this is normally a very small gesture of a thank you, but is easily forgotten when things get busy within clubs, and we know that. So the first thing we want to really concentrate on, if you want to retain your volunteers, show them respect. Show respect for their work, show respect for their effort. No matter what job they have done, no matter how big or how small, show respect to that job that they have done. And also show respect for time. As Tracy has mentioned there as well, okay, don't lie about how long things are going to take. Make them very aware so that they know exactly what they're stepping into. And if you organise a meeting, have respect for someone's time and that you turn up on time and you keep the meeting as short as you possibly can. Okay. The other thing to retain your volunteers is show recognition and reward. This can be formal or informal. So formal recognition in things like the Secretary's report, okay, thanking subcommittees, naming people who have made a significant impact into the club, but also informal, and this is normally the small things that matter. So informal recognition would be a small thank you, making a comment on what someone does, no matter what age we are, we do like to be thanked for what we do. Or we could use things like the papers, the website, social media, to thank people or show what people are doing within the club. So for example, if your club has a litter pick around your club grounds, show photographs, put up, thank people for their work, and you're more likely to get more and more people involved in that as well. Social events, having a volunteer appreciation day. I know within our own club, we have a club barbecue. Well, pre-COVID, we had a barbecue once a year, and it brought all the people from all the different committees and groups and coaches all together as a social event. And generally people brought a friend along and then they got involved, and it actually helped to create a really good atmosphere. It was really positive experience for everyone. As we've already said, the role, have a really clear role for each volunteer. Don't overload volunteers. This leads to burnout, and we all know that person who is completely burnt out. A good volunteer will be given more and more jobs to do. And as officers within a club or as other volunteers, just be aware of how much people are taking on and how much of a workload they have. The idea is that someone who's very experienced, well, as I've already said, could become a mentor within the club, and that can be very significant. And they're able to delegate the roles, they're able to see what needs done. So use people who are very experienced to help new volunteers in the door. And development and progress. So the club itself has to show development. Okay, every club should have a development plan. You should be going somewhere. So there should be progress evident within that. And that's what will keep volunteers. They want to be involved in something very positive and progressive. So for example, if your club was aiming to have a second pitch, okay, there has to be development, there has to be fundraising opportunities, there have to be some kind of plans put in progress to show that. And as well as that, development also means developing your volunteers, as we've already said. Okay, we must help them and help them recognize that they are gaining transferable skills. Like I've said before, their communication skills, their leadership skills, their teamwork skills, they're all really, really important, and they're all gained by becoming a good volunteer. So the last little part of our presentation is on succession planning. And we've actually developed a new resource, and we'll be rolling out new training on this over the next couple of months for all Komogi members. It gives a step-by-step instruction of how to create a succession plan for your club. We're not going into detail today, but a copy of this will be emailed to you at the end of the presentation. Succession plan is just a complicated way of saying that you're going to recruit new volunteers, you're going to train them, look after them, and keep them. Okay. It helps you plan for all those gaps that may be appearing in committees or coaches or coaching panels, that give you practical ways to find the right people for the right role. So quite often you'll find that if one person leaves, lots of people leave, or that there's gaps within committees for long periods of time. And succession plan helps you avoid that and helps you have continual development within your club. And I'm going to pass you over to Tracy now, who's going to take you through some of the positives of succession planning and also make you aware of some of the challenges that you might face when you're going through this process.
Thanks, Pamela. And you know, there's nothing more important, I think, for the vibrancy of a club than to actually look at succession planning. And I think, again, times have changed so much. When I became secretary of our division here in Mokilly, the person who preceded me had been secretary since before I was born. And now I wasn't 20, like, you know, and the thing is, that was because there were no time limits. Now the GA brought in term limits on divisional and club officers, and that's basically how that role became available. And now nobody can serve at county level for more than 5 years. And I definitely would recommend clubs to think about term limits, possibly on, you know, chair and secretary, even if nothing else. It scares us a little bit because we think we won't get people. My club here has a 3-year limit on the chairperson, and to be honest, it has worked really successfully. You know, there usually is a bit of a scramble when you're talking somebody into taking it on, but we've never got in I say never now, but in the last 15 years, we've never got to an AGM where we didn't have somebody lined up to take over for the next 3 years. And I think it has been very good for involving more people, because all of the previous people have stayed involved, you know, because they haven't been burnt out. So that is really important. It's important to think about that. We're minimizing the burnout. It also motivates people because they can see there's an opportunity for them. You have a chance to come in here in Cork in the GA. Now we have 3-year terms on our county board officers, and there's almost never an election or a challenge to a person within those 3 years, because everyone knows they'll get their chance if they just wait. You know, the time will come in 3 years' time. So it's good again there. People can also see that they're not going to be stuck. I think somebody alluded to it earlier, but like, we're not the Hotel California, you know, where you can check in but you can't check out. People have to be able to see that there will be a limit. And, you know, I was reminding someone who asked me just the other day about, you know, they've been approached to take up a role and was looking for a bit of advice. It's a 5-year term. And I said, but, you know, that doesn't mean you have to stay 5 years. It just means that 5 years is the longest you can stay. So we have to be careful that we don't scare people, because nobody wants to feel they're going to be stuck in a role forever. Well, no, maybe some people do, but most people don't. Obviously, there's support there, and it's important that we think about matching people with the correct roles, because there is nothing worse. I always say I would do any role anywhere except treasurer. I could not do it, and I would never do it. And if my club had nobody, I wouldn't do it. So it is important that people are matched up with their skills as well. Having a good succession plan allows us to bring in more people, it allows us to train more people, and it also allows for the preservation of knowledge, because I think that's often a big worry. We're afraid that, you know, the only person who knows how to do the things will be lost to us, and they won't if we build in a plan and that person knows they're going to be succeeded, you know, and they're creating, I suppose, ways that they can hand over that knowledge. It's really, really important. And, you know, I think there you can see recognition and reward, and that is really important too, you know, that it's part of our succession planning, that people are recognized for what they do and rewarded for it. And it's so, so important that we do that, and that we recognize the little things that people do in this way. So to me, there are a huge amount of positives. There are challenges, as we'll see on the next slide, but I don't think there are many negatives. It's more there are challenges. So if you want to move on the slides there, Pamela, thank you. So when we think of the challenges, what are the reasons we need succession planning, and what are the worries we might have around it? And I think these are very well laid out here, and the document which you'll get in relation to succession planning is excellent on all of this. So we have to worry. I think there's one there where it says recruitment is not transparent, and I think that's a huge concern in a club, because and again, now this is a traditional thing and something we need to change. You know, how did that person get that job? How were they picked for it? And it's not very clear. And is it because they had influence or some other reason that we're not happy about? We might feel we'd be a better person for that job, but nobody asked us. We weren't approached for it. Things like that. So we do have to think about that. Fear of change is a huge thing. You know, we all worry a bit about change. I saw a great slide, I often use it, you know, where it's the first picture is who wants to change, and everyone has their hands up. The next one is, who wants change? Everyone has their hands up. Who wants to change? The hands go down. And who wants to lead the change? And everyone runs away, you know. So we're all a little bit nervous about change, but it is important that succession planning then is a planned thing, so we don't have to fear it. We know it's coming. We know there's going to be a change in that officer role or whatever role it may be. We know that's going to come. And another concern we have there is the limited number of volunteers, and that I think is the one that frightens us most in clubs. We think we won't have enough people for the jobs. We think we won't be able to get anyone to do it, and sometimes we won't. You know, we do struggle sometimes to fill all our roles, and that's when we have to look back and say, okay, why is it that this role is causing us a problem to fill? But worrying about the number of people available is not a good enough reason, because we've all been in those situations where somebody has held on to a role so long that they own it, and that should never happen. Nobody owns our clubs, and the club is bigger than any of us. you know, I think the most important thing, the biggest mistake we can ever make is to think we're indispensable, because the reality is no one is. But we have put people in clubs in that position because they've been there for so long that they have all the knowledge. So we need to work ourselves out of that. So there are a lot of challenges around succession planning. It's not an easy thing, but if you take a structured approach as laid out in the guide that you'll be getting, you should be able to work through a very effective succession plan for your club. And I've no doubt that doing so will bring huge benefits. Back to you, Pamela.
Thank you very much. So I know we're slightly over time here, but we'll just finish up with if Niall has any questions there. Otherwise, we'll hand back over to Louise.
Yeah, no, just one or two questions. And thanks very much, ladies. I think it's brilliant to see a roadmap and a vision actually for our volunteers. So I think that's very positive. Just one question actually for both of you. So the first one, Tracy, I'll go to you. Any suggestions on how to get new or without kids that are part of the club? So I suppose we've always focused on maybe people that have kids in the club, but maybe there could be some people out there that mightn't have children involved.
You're breaking up a small bit on me, Niall. You're breaking up a little bit on me, but I think you're asking about how to get people who don't have children in the club involved.
Yes, that was the question. Sorry there.
And you know, I take myself as an example. I'm someone who didn't play really, and I don't have children, and I didn't ever have them involved in the club, and yet I got involved. So I was asked, and it is as simple as that. It is as simple as targeting and approaching people. I do think you have to be careful, like know your people, and particularly I think this applies in terms of women, because there are a lot of different challenges going on in terms of women's lives, and women who maybe have children, not necessarily children who are involved in the club or who have other things going on in their lives. Timing is important as well. You know, we say I was approached to get involved at a time when I had space and time in my life, and I think the people who asked me at that time knew that. So there's a little bit about that in it, but I think you just need to identify the people that you want to target and approach them. You need to be very clear on what you're asking them to do and what support they'll have. And sometimes you will need to boost their confidence a little bit. You need to have prepared in advance. You need to convince them that they will be able to do the role, because that might be their first reaction. You know, I don't think I could do that. So just to keep those things in mind.
Thank you. And then final question there for you, Pamela. Just as well, the few ideas of how to get more women involved in training and coaching players.
So the idea that we could, women in particular, need to get more involved, because women in sport is a powerful thing. Okay, so the programs that we're now launching, things like the Manal program, is the way forward. So if you can just follow the steps of that, get your club involved, you'll see in the chat box there's lots of people recommending that as the way forward. Even if you can get as you said, just some females to attend some of the coaching courses, they can be quite intimidating. We've all been the person that feels like, God, they're all men around me and I'm the only one here. Okay, have the confidence to go, just take part, and you know what, you will feel a lot better for it.
Thank you. No, look, the majority of the questions that come in throughout the week in preparation were based around those two teams. So I'll hand it back to you there, Pamela.
Thank you very much, Niall. And Tracy, thank you so much. It has been great to have you along with us, and all your knowledge and all your experience has been great. I'm just going to hand you back over to Louise now, who's just going to finish up the day for us.
Hi, how are you, everyone? First and foremost, thank you, Pamela and Tracy, for that fantastic workshop. I suppose let me introduce myself. My name is Louise Conlon. I'm the Technical Development and Participation Manager for the Komogi Association. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for attending today's National Development Forum. It's our third one, and we're delighted to bring it online, as I think we've been able to access and make it more accessible to our units across the country and across the world, which has been fantastic. We really want to thank you for your engagement, both pre-registration with your queries and your feedback on areas where we can possibly support you and develop resources moving forward, and also throughout the day through your feedback and questions through our panel discussion and our workshops. So thank you very much. We hope you found today informative, that it's food for thought for all of us, and most importantly, you will go away today with some practical ideas, resources and supports which you as a volunteer and you as your unit may be able to implement over the coming year or further along. Most importantly, I think, stemming from the panel discussion this morning, is the work you, the volunteer, has been doing across all the different levels of our units. I think the impact probably you have sometimes isn't acknowledged, but the work you have done both now, previously and coming forward has a huge impact on both individuals within your units, your unit and your greater community. So thank you on behalf of the association for all your work, and especially over the last 12 months, which has been even more, I suppose, challenging for us all. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank a few people. First and foremost, our panel discussion this morning, to Máire Treasa, who I don't know how she does it, juggling this work, her medical training that's ongoing, etc. To David, Diarmuid, Ursula, Tracy, thank you so much. I think your diversity of experience and knowledge has only added to our workshops today, and I thank you for your time. To our workshop presenters, to Aideen, Stuart, Sabrina and Pamela, thank you so much for all the work you've put into pulling together the workshops for today. And to the other staff who have been working behind the scenes, both leading up to today and behind the scenes today, thank you very, very much. Before we finish up, I'd like to just bring your attention to the, I suppose, slide on the screen. I know there was a few queries on the chat box. That all the presentations today, any of the resources that were spoken about, and we've also added additional resources we thought may be helpful as we begin the new year, and that'll be emailed out to all personnel in the coming days. I'd also like to bring your attention to, we have a variety and vast amount of resources available for all roles across the association, which are on our Komogi, official Komogi website, on our YouTube channel and our Coach and Bubble podcast. So please, if you get a chance, even over the weekend, have a look at those and navigate around and see what's there. So at least then you have reference points if you need to go back there. And I'd also ask you, please keep an eye out on our Twitter and our Instagram accounts over the coming weeks and months, because there will be new resources and supports coming online, and that'll be the quickest way to notify you when they are available. So finally, thank you once again, and best wishes and take care for the coming year. Thank you.